This is the council meeting for Thursday, the 23rd of July, 2020. Please ensure before we start the meeting that any mobile devices or mobile phones are switched off. If you are not speaking or being asked to speak, please mute your microphones. If you do not mute your microphone, it will be muted for you. To assist people viewing the meeting, could everyone turn off their cameras and only turn them on when speaking, and also introduce themselves whenever they speak. If they also face the camera fairly centrally so that their face can be seen and their mouth can be seen, this will improve the ability for those who are hard of hearing to do lip reading as well. To ensure the smooth running of the meeting, could members wishing to speak please use the hands up facility on Teams. Click on the hand and it will appear up, and then you can raise it or lower it throughout the evening as necessary. Please use that facility whenever possible. And please also note that the meeting is currently being webcast live. So we begin with agenda item 32, which is apologies. Does anyone have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. We have apologies from Lindsay Ferris and Guy Granderson.
Thank you. Move now on to agenda item 33, which is the minutes of the last meeting. Does anyone have any amendments to the minutes? And can I therefore have members' agreements to the minutes if they're acceptable? I will assume that you are in agreement with the minutes unless anyone advises that they disagree by using the hands up. I see no hands up, so I'm assuming that the minutes are acceptable. If any amendments were put forward, they would be annotated prior to signing the minutes themselves. Item 34, declarations of interest. Does anyone wish to declare an interest this evening? Councillor Andy Croy, do you have a declaration?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I would like to declare an interest in item 46.4, the Citizens' Advice motion. My mother is a volunteer at Citizens' Advice, so I'm declaring this as a personal interest, but it will not affect my ability to talk or to vote on this motion. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Maria G, your hand is up as well.
Yes, I wish to declare an interest in motion 435, item 46.4, in that I am a trustee of Citizens' Advice and I will be abstaining on this vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see no other hands up. So appears to be no more declarations.
Is Councillor Jenny Cheng in the meeting?
Let's have a look down here.
She is also a trustee.
I am no longer a trustee.
Oh,
I stepped down. Okay.
Oh, right. Okay.
Sorry, I didn't know that.
Councillor Chen. Right. So move now then on to item 35, which is the Mayor's announcement. As we have a fairly large agenda to get through, and there's nothing too exciting for me to say this evening, I shall therefore have no further announcements to make. And that's the end of the Mayor's announcements. Next item is item 36, but I believe Councillor Halsall would wish to speak to you at the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to make a brief statement. We recognise that there is a fundamental issue with the volume of items on the agenda, resulting in those at the end of the agenda unlikely to be reached. At the full council meeting on the 6th of July, the Conservative group, acknowledging the timing pressures, unilaterally withdrew all their members' questions, the only party to do that despite opposition complaints of lack of time. Despite that withdrawal, many motions were still not debated, but we concluded the essential business of the meeting. Today we have 7 motions, which if they take their full 30-minute allocation, means 3.5 hours just on motions, which clearly cannot be fitted in during 3.5 hours of this meeting. So in order to try and address this immediate issue for this meeting only, the Conservative group will withdraw all their members' questions and will be happy with written answers. But this only saves approximately 18 minutes, which is a fraction of time needed for a single debate. Therefore, we will not be asking any ward questions adding to those savings. Continuing this approach, I'll be making a very brief essential statement as leader, but we will not be making any essential executive statements, nor will we be making any reports from council-owned companies, saving another 30 minutes. But let's not lose sight of reality in that we will not be able to cover all 7 motions on these actions alone, as they will only release approximately an hour, which is equivalent to 2 motions, unless parties are disciplined and limit their number of speakers. We shall be fielding only 2 for each motion. If opposition parties limit themselves each to 1, each motion will take 15 minutes. I propose this meeting is extended to 11 p.m. and the Conservative group will support this. Then and only then will we complete the agenda. I have proposed to the main opposition party several amendments to the standard agenda and timing of council meetings in order that the agenda can be normally completed whilst we continue to have virtual meetings and thereafter, if applicable. A constitutional review working party meeting is in the diary for August, which could allow for an early introduction if the parties cooperate. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I've noticed a couple of hands have gone up. Councillor Andy Croy, you've raised your hand. Do you wish to speak?
Mr. Mayor, I'm afraid I'd left my hand up from the previous occasion. My apologies, but I will be wanting to talk on this in a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Give me a couple of minutes, I'll be back.
Councillor Stephen Conway, your hand is up. Do you wish to speak, or was that a mistake?
No, it wasn't a mistake, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to. I'm surprised but pleased by John Halsall's statement. It has taken us, I think, by surprise on our side, but it's good news, and it's very pleasing that the Conservative group seem to be now prepared to allow the council meeting to extend to 11 o'clock and are doing what they can to facilitate its covering all the business of this evening's meeting. I should say, I'm sure he will understand that opposition councillors feel we have a duty to hold the ruling group and its executive to account, and we will not be slackening in that responsibility we have. But I thank him for what he's proposed.
Thank you, Councillor Conway. There is a point I think I need to be aware. Councillor Halsall has recommended that we go on till 11 o'clock, but that would need to be proposed and voted on at the appropriate time. We can't guarantee until we get to that point whether it will happen. But I've noted his within the speech his recommendation that it would. Okay. So we now move on then. I can't see any other. Oh yes, there's another hand up. Councillor Croy again. Would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you. I am a bit surprised by this. I think if this was seriously John's intent, he would have spoken to us or just emailed us in advance about what he's going to do. I know I've made commitments to some of my residents to talk on things, and I believe other members of my group have. So it is a surprise, and I just don't understand why it's dumped on people. It's almost like John is trying to get some sort of a temporary advantage on the night by doing so. I think if we do want to move items around the agenda like this, we have to follow the correct procedure, and it would be nice, as I said, if people spoke to us in advance.
Okay, that's noted. Thank you, Councillor Croy. I'll just have a look in case anyone else has got their hands up. No, I can't see any. So we now move on then to agenda item 36, which is public question time, for which we have a maximum of 30 minutes. Supplementaries are allowed. But can I remind you that supplementary questions, well, firstly, the questions themselves should be as concise as possible without too much packing around them. so that we can deal with as many as possible on the matter that's in question. Supplementary questions, if used, should relate either to the original question or to the response that was given to that original question. Executive members likewise should be no longer than 2 minutes in an answer, and these will be timed. So on that basis, I have a list here, and I would like to invite Ed Pearson to ask his question, please, of Pauline Jorgensen.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for taking my question today. I would like to know if Wokingham Council is planning on taking part in the electric scooter trials proposed by the Department for Transport, seeing as it is a new, affordable, socially distanced and environmentally friendly form of transport, and taking part in these trials would see Wokingham leading the way on commitments to fighting climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question, Ed. Very nice to speak to you. It's correct, local authorities were given the opportunity to become trial sites for allowing electric scooters on public roads. The plan is for these trials to help inform government on what sort of a legislation they should bring in to ensure that scooters are used appropriately and are safe for both the users and others, particularly pedestrians and other vulnerable road users. Those trial sites will be allowed rental e-scooters, but none that are privately owned, to use public highway, and the Highways Authority has been able to set its own guidance in terms of whether they can be used on footways, shared paths and or carriageways. There are some safety concerns and issues such as difficulty in indicating. They're very unstable if ridden one-handed, and their small wheels are susceptible to surface defects and debris. In addition, in a town centre setting and on shared paths, they may be seen as a nuisance by many, and we do not feel it's appropriate to encourage their use at this time. We will, however, be continuing to monitor the situation and see what other people's experience is, and we will certainly review that decision in due course when we see how it goes in other areas. With regard to the climate change agenda, we have a My Journey team who've completed some excellent work promoting sustainable travel and teaching adults and children to cycle and use human-powered scooters safely. We're also delivering infrastructure for sustainable travel, including the park and ride sites, greenways, and we're currently completing the next phase of the A3 to 9M cycleway. Our new roads also include provision for cycling, and we've put a cycleway recently on the Reading Road going into Wokingham. There's little evidence that scooter journeys will replace car journeys, and shifting people from cycling and walking to scooters will therefore have a negligible impact on our climate emergency objectives. However, as I said, we will monitor it and we will continue to see how it progresses, and if it looks like it's going to be successful elsewhere, we will look at it again. Thank you.
Mr. Pearson, do you have a supplementary to the question?
No, thank you for that response. I am happy with that. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
In that case, we move on to Leanne Henderson to ask your question of Councillor John Halsall. But the question has been asked on behalf of Kiran Na.
Yeah, that's correct. Hello.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking my question. So, Mr. Halsall, at a recent council meeting, you said that equality and diversity were hardwired into Wokingham Borough Council's DNA. You then proceeded to make public statements that have caused outrage to Black residents, staff and the public. You've since launched a survey to understand racism more, despite saying that equality is actually hardwired. Clearly, the statements made by you about equality and diversity is contradicted by your offensive comments. So is it really genuinely hardwired into Wokingham Borough Council's DNA? And what research did you conduct on BLM, that's Black Lives Matter, before your statements were made? And can you explain how and why such an important mandate on the council's position was considered? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leanne. I was as shocked and as disgusted at the killing of George Floyd as any other right-thinking person, and it is my sincere hope that the world can change for the better as a result of the outcry it has produced. I completely support the message, principles and aims of Black Lives Matter in the UK. I've always been opposed to discrimination in all its forms. I understand the need today to have a clear focus on tackling racism where it is found. If any comments I have made have been offensive to anybody, I apologise unreservedly. That was never my intention. Rather, by reaching out, we had hoped to bring residents together. I fully support Nelson Mandela, who said, "I detest racialism because I regard it as a barbaric thing, whether it comes from a black man or a white man." Woking Borough Council is anti-racist, promotes equality and celebrates diversity. We are determined to do better to ensure that every resident in the borough feels truly valued. We are proud of the work we do with the BME Forum and worked with its chair and vice chair to produce the public survey you mentioned. The survey allows anybody who has experienced racism in any form, as well as anybody with views on how the issue can be tackled. It is deliberately an open listening exercise that acknowledges there will be problems we have not seen and answers we have not thought of. The survey is open throughout July and August, and I urge everybody to take part. In March 17, we adopted an equalities policy, which was published on the website. The position the council has taken is underpinned by that policy. While we accept that we may need to revisit the policy, any change would need to be passed by full council. I accept that, as Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We must learn to live together as brothers, or we'll perish together as fools. I'm genuinely surprised and shocked that this rational, energetic, determined and reasonable approach that the council has taken should be considered offensive. I can only reiterate my council and mine ongoing commitment to combat racism, strive for equality and celebrate diversity. I believe you have a supplementary, Leanne. If you
Am I allowed to? I was waiting to be told. Actually, my supplementary would be, could you tell me what kind of resources you actually have and how you're going to be putting those into place? And what are your personal thoughts on it?
What are my personal thoughts?
Can I just say?
Yeah. Hello?
I have a note that says there is not a supplementary on every question. So,
would you like me to answer that, Mr. Mayor?
If you wish, I suppose.
Certainly.
Started.
The question was resources. We employ about 1,200 people, and those are the resources which we will apply, plus our influence, to be anti-racist and promote equality and diversity. I think that was the question.
Thank you, Councillor Helsel. We don't want a long conversation. This is the point. I imagine it would probably be like quite a long conversation. So thank you, Councillor Helsel. Now move on to the next person, which is Llewellyn Reid Jones, to ask a question of Parry Bart. Is Llewellyn Reid Jones available? No. In that case, the question will be read and a written answer provided. Now move on to Louise Timlin to ask her question of Councillor John Halsell.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
I can.
So I'd like to, thank you. I'd like to ask about your annual pay policy statement. So the gender pay gap at Woking Borough Council is increasing. The difference in the mean hourly rate was 13.9% in 2018, increasing to 15.2% in 2019. And whilst the council is rightly proud that 9 of their 22 most senior roles are held by women, including the post of chief executive, there was a bonus gap of 55.4%. indicating that despite the number of senior roles held by women, men are receiving substantially bigger bonus payments. The Council has an opportunity in the publication of the annual pay policy statement to make clear their action plan for addressing the increasing gender pay gap. I note that the annual pay policy statement from Reading Council includes the following statement. Reading Borough Council is committed to equality, transparency and fairness across all of its activities, and particularly in relation to pay and conditions of its staff. So will Woking Borough Council commit to including an action plan to address their gender pay gap in the annual pay policy statement? And if not, at a minimum, would they commit to include a statement of intent, such as the one included by Reading Council?
Thank you very much for the question. Our pay policy statement is a statutory document that provides the public with information as outlined in the requirements of Section 38 of the Localism Act 2011. Our statement of intent in relation to the gender pay gap is included in our annual Equality Action Plan for 2020, which is due to be published in September, and introduces a gender pay gap subgroup to develop proposals to reduce our gender pay gap by 1% year on year for the next 3 years. There's been a delay in the publication this year to ensure we address the issues highlighted by Black Lives Matter, and will now get to Personnel Board for their consideration in September.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary?
No, thank you.
No. Okay, thank you. In that case, we move on to Mr. Andrew Popple to ask his question of Ulliker and Clark.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Given the Climate Emergency Action Plan, it's important that the need to travel is reduced to reduce emissions and congestion and the associated health concerns. 17% of sixth formers live in the south of Wokingham, yet there is no sixth form school option available. The demand for post-16 places is in the south of the borough, and in line with the Climate Emergency Action Plan, what are Wokingham Borough Council doing about creating capacity now where it is needed?
Hello, good evening. It's nice to see you after having corresponded with you. So it is certainly the case that students from across the borough travel to school. It could be privately or public transport. And we are presently reviewing our home to school transport arrangement in the light of our declared climate emergency. So watch this space. In terms of education, we are also undertaking a review of our post-16 provision to make sure that we continue to have adequate sufficiency of high quality learning opportunities for all our children. And presently we have sufficiently capacity within the borough to meet the educational needs of young people wishing to enter sixth form provision. And when it is needed, we will of course expand such provision so that nobody will be left behind.
Okay. Okay. Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Popple?
If the Bourne Education Trust was to put forward an offer to cover the cost of a temporary school until that demand was deemed to be needed by Wokingham Borough Council, meeting the demand where it's needed and reducing the impact on the environment now, would that be something Wokingham Borough Council would wish to take forward?
There is nothing stopping Bohan Trust to submit the planning application. Of course, it will be dealt with like any other planning applications, so I can't comment on the outcome. But it seems to me that perhaps that would be a way forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ulliker and Clark. That's the end of the public question time. We now move agenda item 37, which is petitions. Councillor Charles Margette, that you wish to present a petition.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been asked to present a petition on behalf of a large group of my residents in support of providing a sixth form at Bohunt School ASAP. In 2005, when I first moved to Finchampstead, I remember visiting the local store and seeing a petition raised by my predecessor, Rob Stanton, looking for support for a full secondary school in the south of Wokingham. 17% of sixth form children live in the south and there is no sixth form facility nearby at all. Bohunt School would like to start a sixth form. WBC has advised them this cannot happen until at least 2024-25. This petition, which has been handed in, has been signed by a four-figure number of residents and asks for a change. One reason which has been given why a sixth form cannot be provided in 2020-21 is there is spare capacity across the north of Wokingham. Only one school is expected to be full in September. However, there is a fundamental misunderstanding in hand in believing that the majority of children from Finchampstead would choose, in the absence of local provision, to go to schools in the north of Wokingham. It's easier and quicker from all parts of Finchampstead to get to Farnborough College, which is easily accessible by rail. The bottom line is there are not enough local children to use the surplus capacity, and this is not a realistic way to fill it up. Later tonight, my colleague Councillor Murray will discuss the climate emergency plan, something I fully support. If we are to be successful in reducing emissions within Wokingham, we need to look at reducing the need to travel as much as possible. Developing a sixth form in the south of Wokingham would remove the need for a big group of people to travel to school every day and would be in line with the climate emergency plan. The big obstacle to a sixth form is currently put forward in the south of the borough as cost. The cost of a new build sixth form at Bohunt is estimated at £6 million, and we all know the COVID situation has had a very negative effect on council finances. WBC expects that currently all spare capacity in the borough will be exhausted by 2024-25 when more space will be needed. On the 17th of June, the Bohunt Trust wrote to WBC officers suggesting it would offer a significant financial contribution to the provision of a temporary sixth form on the site. A month has passed and there's been no response. WBC has been offered a zero-cost, low-cost alternative. I know WBC has concerns with Bohunt over its general admissions policy and a number of SEND children admitted, and it would appear that both parties have much to gain by engaging with each other ASAP for the benefit of local residents. This council exists only to serve its residents. In handing in this petition tonight, these residents are calling on WBC to engage constructively with the Bohunt Trust and achieve a resolution which works for the benefit of my residents. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Burgess. Thank you for summarising some noises. Thank you for summarising the petition, which I believe has already been sent to Democratic Services, and it will now be passed to the appropriate officer for dealing with. We now move on to agenda item 38, the Climate Emergency Action Plan. I believe this is to be proposed by Councillor Gregor Murray. Councillor Murray, you are there to speak. Good. Understand you're going to propose this.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I am going to propose this, and it is seconded by Councillor Laura Blumenthal.
Councillor Laura Blumenthal, thank you. And can you please speak? Excuse me. Can you please speak for up to 3 minutes, please? We will inform you if you're getting nearer the 3-minute time limit.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 6 months ago, I presented to Council the initial Climate Emergency Action Plan, a document that laid out our 8 key focus areas and initial steps towards reaching carbon neutral by 2030. Today, I present 37 core targets, 123 key actions and 385 milestones, along with a financial plan and carbon budget that will take our borough from emitting 580,000 net carbon tonnes each year to emitting just 72,000 net carbon tonnes per year. It is true that we're not 100% of the way there yet, but Mr. Mayor, we are 1 year into this journey and we have 10 left to go. This document contains all the actions that we currently intend to take in order to fight climate change. And here, Mr. Mayor, I must stress the word currently. This document will evolve over time. Actions will be added and some may be removed as we get closer to 2030. We are still calculating the carbon saving of some of our initiatives, and in the background there are programmes being worked through and evaluated at the moment that are not currently included in this plan and that will reduce our carbon footprint even further. We need more time to fully conclude the levels of evaluation that our residents deserve, which is why they're not currently included. If and when we do intend to proceed with these programmes, I will return to Council and inform members of what they are, how much they will cost, how we will pay for them and what carbon saving we can expect from them. Mr. Mayor, this plan demonstrates that Wokingham is among the leading councils when it comes to the fight against climate change. As a reminder, this plan sets out to nearly double our network of greenways, double public transport use across the borough, build electric vehicle charging infrastructure, improve our air quality, invest heavily into renewable energy generation, provide support to residents in making environmentally friendly improvements to their homes, retrofit our schools, plant 250,000 trees, engage young people in living low carbon lives, increase our recycling and send zero waste to landfill, set stretching emissions targets for new house building, change the way our council buys goods and services, and actively encourage our residents and local businesses to change their behaviours. This plan is the result of thousands of hours of work by officers from across the council to whom we should all be hugely grateful. Particularly, I'd like to thank the officers who, rather than paying expensive consultants to undertake our carbon budgeting for us, chose to build that knowledge and expertise in-house. In doing so, we've learned firsthand how to reduce our carbon footprint and impact our efforts will have. We also avoid the cost of paying consultants every time we want new initiatives or change our plans. The supporting documentation to the action plan is in many ways just as impressive as the actual plan itself. For the sake of all of our children and all of our futures, I ask all members to vote to endorse this action plan. In 10 years' time, when we live in a carbon neutral borough, we will look back now on how we voted and be glad that we did. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Laura Blumenthal, you seconded this. Do you wish to speak now or speak later?
I'll speak now, thank you.
Okay. Well, can I just say, though, before you go any further, I have a whole, if you could have a fistful of hands showing, they all came up within about the first 20 seconds of Councillor Murray's speech. I don't know whether they relate to this particular issue or the previous one, but if you'd like to continue speaking on your item, and I'll address these after you've spoken. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be seconding Woking Borough Council's Climate Emergency Plan. This is a living document, one which will be revised, evolved, some parts scribbled out and some added to constantly over the next decade. This plan has grown significantly since the initial Climate Emergency Plan was adopted at full council in January. When we compare it to other UK councils' plans, Woking Borough is shown as leading in best practice. Looking through the Core Cities and Climate Emergency Report published this month, which critiques the plans of Birmingham, Sheffield, Manchester, Nottingham, Bristol, Liverpool and Cardiff, we can be proud of the plan we have today. This is due to the talent and dedication of our officers and this council's commitment to our residents to helping this borough be carbon neutral by 2030. There were 3 key failings identified in the Core Cities report, which was a trend among the city's climate emergency plans. One was that few were costed or even had plans for funding. We're far from this ourselves. Our plan has many specific pound signs attached and will continue to be updated over the next decade. The second was that green recovery was more of a slogan than a reality, with few clear next steps in the city's plans. We have pages and pages of detailed steps and plans in wide areas of focus. The final issue in the report was that engagement was rarely ongoing or citywide. This is totally against our approach. We know that constant engagement with local businesses, schools and residents are a must to use our collective knowledge and efforts to hit our climate emergency target. Is our plan what good looks like? Benchmarked to other councils in the UK, it is better than good. We can be truly proud of where we are right now, to springboard into this decade with a strong plan to build up to carbon neutrality by 2030. Woking Borough Council has a strong Climate Emergency Advisory Board, which has reviewed this plan. They're a dream team of experts in this area. We must thank the University of Reading, National Grid, Greater South East Energy Hub, the chairman of WBC Business Group, Sustrans, Scottish Southern Electric, Volker Highways, Reading Buses, South Western Railway, Great Western Railway, and all the other businesses, charities and residents who have reviewed and contributed to this plan. Our plan will grow and develop and include technological advancements as they emerge over the next decade to ensure all our efforts are heightened to create a truly carbon neutral borough by 2030. There's a quote by Sir David Attenborough I'd like to leave you with on the environment. Many individuals are doing what they can, but real success can only come if there's change in our societies and in our politics. I recommend this plan to be accepted.
Thank you, Councillor Blumenthal. At this point, I would normally say, does anyone else wish to speak? But I already have an enormous number of hands showing. I'd like to go first, please, to Councillor Sarah Carr.
Thank you. I would like to actually propose an amendment to this item, please. And I understand that Democratic Services can put it up on the screen to be read.
Do you have a seconder for it, by the way?
I do. Councillor Clive Jones will be seconding it.
Councillor James, thank you. So,
can I just confirm it's coming up on the screen for everyone to read?
Yes, it's there now.
Okay, I'll just read it out. Or shall I read it out or just go to...
Yes, I think it would be worthwhile.
Okay, Okay, so it's that the council approves the climate emergency action plan, endorsing the targets where available for carbon dioxide reduction and the related actions proposed for Woking Borough Council to play as full a role as possible in achieving a carbon neutral borough by 2030, but notes that much more work needs to be done before it can hope to achieve that aim. And if I go into my speech, is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I welcome the progress that's been made so far in the development of the Climate Emergency Action Plan. It is a vast improvement on what was presented to us at the beginning of the year, and I would like to thank the officers for the hard work that has gone into it, particularly against the backdrop of COVID. The intention of this amendment is not to lessen that recognition, but to acknowledge that there is still much work to do. This document will always evolve, but it needs to meet a certain baseline first, which it hasn't quite done yet. There are a number of gaps still which need addressing, numbers that don't add up, and I fear instances of double counting. By way of example, with regards to the latter, this seems to be the case in Target 4, Modal Shift, where a number of the actions are interdependent. Target 7, which is 50% electric vehicles registered, has actions which will be needed for the 25% uptake of EVs, which is the government's target. What are we doing above and beyond this in order to achieve 50%, particularly as action 7.9, which is enabling street lighting columns to be EV charging ready, particularly important for those who don't have off-street parking, has an issue. Lamp columns are placed at the back of a pavement for safety, accessibility and practical reasons, but running cables across a footpath to an EV is dangerous. Then there's the matter that surely the government's projected 25% EV uptake is included in the national policy carbon reductions in this plan, meaning that the carbon saving is being double counted. These are just some examples, but fundamentally the measures in the plan thus far will not equate to carbon neutrality and fall short of us achieving that target. My biggest concern, though, is that changing people's behaviour, which is paramount to the success of this, is not sufficiently addressed. We run the risk of underestimating the enormity of the task and not bringing people with us. If we don't communicate effectively and work on behavioural change, this will be an uphill battle. As this action plan continues to evolve, we must not delay on action. Whilst achieving carbon neutrality is crucial, how we achieve it is equally important, and the sooner we start with the big ticket items, the better for our planet. As such, I am making a request that the appropriate committee and full council see as soon as possible a costed business case for the Green Bank initiative. I'm really pleased to see this initiative in the action plan and fully support it. Residential buildings produce a huge amount of carbon emissions, and as COVID has resulted in more people working from home, as we enter the colder months of the year, this sector will only increase. It is imperative that we address this now without delay. Once again, I want to thank everyone involved for the development of this and look forward to the next iteration, plus the business cases for the various actions, in particular for the Green Bank. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Can I go next to Councillor Alison Swaddle, please? No?
Sorry, it has to be spoken by the seconder.
Sorry, Clive Jones. Sorry, I want to ask him if he's going to speak now or speak later.
I'll speak now, please, Malcolm.
Okay, please do so. Okay, continue.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to second this motion. Our officers have done a very good job putting together this action plan, especially if they have had so much to cope with in these last 4 months dealing with COVID-19. We think that it's important to recognise that although there is some detail in this action plan, there is much that is missing. We therefore, as the amendment says, need to note that much more work needs to be done before we can achieve the aim of a net zero carbon borough by 2030. In this action plan, we have 47 actions, but still don't have a carbon budget set against them. We welcome the aim to double the use of public transport. There are costs against various new bus schemes, but at the Climate Emergency Working Group last week, the executive member for highways didn't know if these costs were for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years or what. So clearly more work needs to be done here. There are 4 sites for solar farms in the action plan. Really good ideas, but we still don't know where they are to be sited, and we don't know how much they're going to cost or how much profit there will be made from them. There is a target of extra bottle banks, which again is good. But where will they go? In early last week, one was removed by Woking Borough Council. Putting in targets without a credible plan of how to achieve the plan has to be recognised as a work in progress. We welcome the creation of a green bank, but again, we need more details of this ambitious plan. What is this going to cost? How much money will we be putting in? And who will be our partners in this ambitious project? The action plan commits us to more electric car charging points. Again, we need clearer thinking before we can move forward with this. Where on pavements will they be? Lib Dems support the plan to plant more than 250,000 trees in the borough. We would like to add to this a specific creation of a COVID-19 memorial wood. The residents who have been lost over the past 4 to 5 months and during the rest of this pandemic can then be remembered by having a tree planted in their memory. I hope that the members will pass this amendment and that they will then pass the amended motion. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I still have lots of hands up here, and can I go next to... Yeah, sorry. Following your speech, Councillor Jones, I need to ask Councillor Murray whether he will accept your amendment.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, on behalf of the Conservative Group, I do accept the amendment.
Okay, thank you. So we now fall into a debate then on the amended version, and I've still got all these hands up. So if I can go next to Councillor Alison Swaddle.
Hello, good evening, Mr. Mayor. As you are fully aware, because you are a valued member, the Climate Emergency Task and Finish Group has been scrutinising the Emergency Action Plan as it's been emerging. We've met on 4 occasions, undeterred by lockdown, and received evidence from a number of council officers and from the executive member, Councillor Murray. You know, we found it very useful to be able to scrutinise officers and give feedback to Councillor Murray and to the officers. And we've been very pleased to see that the cross-party Task and Finish group, our scrutiny has influenced the plan, and some of our suggestions have been adopted by officers. It's a cross-party group, as I said. We've got Conservatives, Labour, Lib Dem, and we've all been working together in the best interest of our residents, without any needed, political point scoring or grandstanding, because, we're all here for our residents and to ensure that we're providing the best plan. And as all the members agreed when we wrote to Councillor Murray recently, we were pleased with the progress that the action plan had improved, it changed. And I'd just like to emphasise today that it is a living document. It's going to have future iterations. It will come back to the council in a year's time. And the progress that's been made, it has become a far more robust document than we saw the initial action plan 6 months ago. It's underpinned by extensive data, detailed research, and I echo the comments of other councillors tonight, commending the officers for the excellent progress and their hard work. The Climate Emergency Task and Finish Group will next week be interviewing Professor Paul Chatterton to have an outside expert view of our plan, and we will continue to be scrutinising the plan, aiming to report back in September. So yes, I support the amendment and congratulate Councillor Murray on his work.
Thank you, Councillor Swaddle. So I'll go down this list. The next person is Councillor John Kaiser, please. Councillor Kaiser? Yes.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. You have to give us time to turn the microphones on, you know. I wasn't actually going to speak on this, but I think it's quite important that I do. If anybody's listened to what I've said in the past, the problems and the impact, the financial impact of COVID. The nice thing about a lot of this plan, and we talk about solar farms, for instance, if you just take solar farms, not only do they generate clean, renewable and sustainable energy, but they also are commercially viable and they deliver revenue. And we can use that revenue to subsidise and to pay for match valued services in the borough. So I would suggest that quite a lot of this plan is commercial, and if we continue down this route, I believe that we're going to be looking at delivering these. And I heard what Councillor Jones said, and we have identified areas where these sites will be, and at some point, once we've actually discussed them and come through them, we will be able to explain to people where they're. The council does own an awful lot of land, which gives them a great opportunity to deliver these solar farms. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kaiser. Gary Cowan, could you speak next, please?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd echo the view that the council's work in such adverse conditions today is very welcome. And what I would say is started reading a 97-page climate emergency document within a 164-page agenda on a computer screen is actually quite difficult, and where the devil is in the details. So if I miss any key points, I do apologise now. The climate emergency document has lots to commend it, but I have serious reservations on how the plan fits in with planning today and in future years. The introduction makes a reference to the word plan for now and the future, but the now is really not fit for purpose, as planning currently allows trees to be cut down to make way for development, TPO trees to be cut down unnecessarily to improve sightlines, and increased road traffic and pollution permitted in congested urban areas also to enable development. In current planning terms, climate emergency is actually an alien concept, where the unbalanced phrase is used regularly to bring in development that could quite easily have been refused. Page 94 makes reference to a supplementary planning document to support the new local plan. But unless there's the slightest chance of being carbon neutral by 2030, but I certainly do welcome it as long as the point on the SPG becomes part of the new local plan and not as an alien separate document. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Cowan. Could I now ask Councillor Carl Doran to speak, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Judging what's been said by other members already, I think I must have been sent a different plan, or perhaps I just bothered to read it. This plan fails to even aspire to deliver on its mission statement. It falls far short of its targets. It's extremely disappointing. My motion amendment to declare a climate emergency a full year ago now intended to put the public in the driving seat and use the working group to crunch the figures. Instead, this has been a secretive and controlled process led by the politics rather than the evidence. There has been no real engagement with the public, the working group, or with councillors. I mean, the assumption that our starting carbon footprint will be cut in half by national government action alone is extremely dubious, especially as that halving includes the take-up of electric vehicles, which is also accounted for as a separate target in this plan, counted twice. Greenways, I love them, but why are they in this plan? £7.5 million for a 4-tonne emission reduction. That's 15% of the fiscal budget in return for 0.002% of our carbon footprint. Who made this stuff up? We're going to double bus use by building a few bus stops and retendering a contract. No, but the calculations ignore the emissions from the extra buses. The real saving is about half what is quoted. We're going to double train use. Amazing. But 30,000 residents already using trains are being counted towards those emission savings from switching to trains. Again, the true emission saving is about half what the plan says. We want a 20% reduction in total distance travelled by private cars, but the figures don't include 34,000 diesel engine cars in the borough. The figures don't account for the 8,000 more homes we have to build by 2030, double that in Graiseley. How many extra cars is that? There are several targets like the ones on modal shift and bikeability that appear to be duplicated. The plan also lists a cycleway built for £1 million that has no climate benefit in a climate emergency plan. Pointless. Finally, the plan says 50% of new SDL residents will travel sustainably every day. Well, of course, you have to pretend that you can get half of them out of their cars. Otherwise, people might see that allowing all this development would be a massive contributory factor to the climate emergency. The figures in this plan are fractally wrong. The further you zoom in, the more you find wrong. The biggest obstacle to reducing carbon emissions these days is no longer climate change denial. It's those who want to delay action on climate change. And this is the kind of plan I would expect from those people. The same people who misled us on Heathrow expansion and its 9 million tonnes of carbon emissions. Voting for this would send a message that the plan is acceptable. It is not, and I will not be an accomplice to this attempt to mislead residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Calderon. Could I ask Councillor Jim Fruin to speak next, please?
I can. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd first of all like to thank the officers and Gregor for producing this as a starter for 10. It is a living document and it is just about a way of getting us going. Some of the things we don't seem to be recognising within this is that it's going to change how we as members and we as a council behave and act across many of our services. Already tonight we've mentioned school transport, school allocation with sixth forms, and of course planning. We're talking about planting 250,000 trees. How many have we lost in the last 10 years? A report today comes out to show that 2 million acres of greenland and woodland have been lost in the last 25 years in the UK. Most of that seems to be coming from Shinfield. We need to look at how we do business. We talk about changing the culture and the behaviours of residents. I think we need to look at how we change the culture and the behaviours of council and how we do business. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And since time is moving on, could I ask Councillor Paul Fishwick to speak next, please? And if we can try and keep some of the speeches a little shorter so that we can deal with it within the time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to thank officers of Wokingham Borough Council for all the work they have put into this climate emergency action plan. I'd also like to thank Councillor Murray for accepting this amendment on behalf of the Lib Dem group. It is an extremely important document and is likely to be the most important one this decade. This council declared a climate emergency 12 months ago, and in January we were presented with an initial action plan. At that time it was a wish list of measures that may or may not deliver the outcome required to make Wokingham Borough carbon neutral. It is acknowledged that through the hard work of officers during a very difficult time with COVID-19 pandemic, they have managed to develop what was a wish list into a more comprehensive document with some meaningful forecasted reductions in carbon. However, with many gaps in the data analysis and financial costs of projects still to be ascertained, this document cannot be accepted as detailed, but I can endorse the targets where they are available to enable the document to progress. At this stage, it is not robust enough to meet the criteria of a business case. Until we know the full extent of the modelling outputs, we as members of the Borough Council would not want to know whether the measures proposed will be enough or the correct ones to reach the 2030 target for carbon neutrality. Therefore, because climate change is such an important issue, I am supporting this amendment. It will allow officers the additional time required to complete what is an enormous task during a difficult time. As I said earlier, this document is likely to be the most important one this decade. We therefore must get it right, as there is no second chance with a climate emergency. The clock is ticking fast, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fishwick. And we go next, very quickly, please, to Councillor Rachel Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm frankly incredulous at the glowing comments we heard earlier from Councillors Murray and Blumenthal about how apparently wonderful this plan is, just amazing. And personally, I'm extremely disappointed that the executive member was appointed as member for the climate emergency 14 months ago, and all this time later the action plan produced is still 73 kilotons short of what is needed. For context, that's 25% of the carbon reductions required that are still not accounted for, and of course that assumes everything goes according to plan. I recognise the work that's gone into producing these detailed calculations. It's what we have been calling for, but on closer inspection, as we have heard, it seems the numbers in the plan just don't add up. So to illustrate this, I just want to focus on some changes for individual households. So one example, if you look at page 77 of the pack, it states that a green bank will be set up to encourage residents to borrow money to fund solar panels. But there's two immediate issues with that. In 13.2, the plan states that estimates that 15,000 households will apply to the green bank. So that's roughly a quarter of the households in the borough. Is that really realistic? The households are paying for the technology, whether they borrow the money or not. So is there really enough of an incentive that a quarter of the households will do this? And then in the next point, in 13.3, it appears to be an exact copy of the outcome of 13.2, just with a different heading. So again, that 15,000 households will apply to the green bank. So either that's a double count and the calculations are way too high, or perhaps the council thinks that 30,000 households, half the borough's households, will take up the technology and the loan. It just doesn't make sense. And then also, if you look at retrofitting homes, so the government's own estimate is that 10% of homes can be retrofitted. Now, for some reason, Woking Borough Council think we can retrofit double that amount at 20%. Why? It looks to me that the council are just desperately inflating figures to meet target. We need ambition, but Councillor Murray should know you can't just go through targets and double them arbitrarily. That's not real ambition. And also the detailed calculations on page 123 show that this 20%, assuming it is realistic, generates savings of 35,000 kilotons. But in the main report, it shows 44,000.
Can I interrupt you?
Okay, I'll just wrap up. So I can't vote for a plan that basically doesn't fulfil its brief and just doesn't add up. 25% short of target, more if you fix the errors that we have spotted. We need a real change and a proper plan, and this is nowhere near acceptable.
Yeah. I now go to Councillor Murray. Would you like to have your right to reply, please?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I've had my hand up and I haven't had a chance to speak yet.
Yeah, well, we had more hands in than we could fit in the time, basically.
No, there's no time limit on this part of the meeting. There's no it's not a motion. There's no 30-minute limit.
Can you bear with me? I'll just. Yes, I'll come back to you. I have sought advice on this, and the situation is that all of these items are treated as if they were motions, and they are all allocated 30 minutes. And so,
sorry, that's not written down, Mr. Mayor. That's just being made up. And we've got two members of my group who haven't spoken yet. We have limited ourselves on the rest of the agenda, but on this part of the agenda, I think we must be heard.
Just a moment.
It might help if you hadn't run through all the Conservative members to start with.
I'm advised that there are guidelines which say that we treat these plans and reports in the same way as we do motions, and in terms of 30 minutes, and that is the time.
Mr. Mayor, every single Conservative has spoken. There's been no attempt at all to make this proportional. Every single Conservative has spoken.
Every single Conservative has not spoken.
No.
Every single Conservative who had their hand up had spoken.
No, apart from the people who proposed and seconded, I've got Councillor Kaiser, and after that, I've got Carl Doran, Rachel Burgess, Paul Fishwick, Jim Fluid.
Of those who had their hands up.
I don't think so. Well, we've processed them and we've given a fair crack of the whip across the.
No, run through all the Tories first.
I don't think we have had a fair crack of the whip.
You've had more than your proportion of councillors.
For our group, this is a very important issue, Pauline. I didn't realise you were chairing the meeting.
Didn't realise.
I think it's important for all councillors, to be honest, Councillor.
Yeah, so exactly. In that, it's important for all councillors, so all councillors should be heard on this.
Yes, but
there are other items on this agenda, and they're going to go through without a vote, or without any with a vote, but without any members saying anything, because we'll all just agree on it. But this is not one of those items.
Well, if we need to get this through in the time,
but we don't though. We've already cleared a massive chunk of the agenda out. There's no pressure on time. You've got, I think, 2 people in my group. I think Prue wants to speak, unless she's changed her mind. It sounds like Pauline wants to speak. That's 4 people. It's 12 minutes.
And it wasn't we. It was the Conservative group that freed up the time, not we.
I think I need to make a decision as to how to achieve this without spending a lot of time looking at rules and regulations and counter-challenging. Can I go, please, to Councillor Murray to do his right of reply, after which we can go?
No, Mr. Mayor, I don't think this is right. I really don't think this is right.
Well, I'm attempting to chair a meeting where people are spending time arguing about which order they're speaking in.
Why don't you? I think you should let the members who want to talk on this talk on this.
And I went through the list, and there are still obviously a couple of hands left, but we need to try and get this done within the time so that we can cover as much of the agenda as possible. And I would like to ask Councillor Murray to address, please.
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. This is really unacceptable.
Mr. Mayor, could you ask Anne Hunter if she would give guidance as to the constitutional position we're in?
I've sought advice through our officers, and that is the advice, that we treat them all as 30-minute items.
Would you refer me then to the part of the Constitution which says, if it's written down, that it says that this is treated
Andy,
as
I think it's up to you to identify which standing order you're speaking under.
No, I'm looking at the Constitution now. And I can't see anything which limits this part of the meeting. The limits on motions are very, very clear, and everyone accepts that. Last week, I think we had far more time than this on the planning committee thing. We are sent here by our residents to be heard, and we accept sometimes there are limitations. This is not one of those times where there are limitations.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. I believe you are in charge, and it's your decision.
Yes, I think, well, I am attempting to go to Councillor Murray to do his right to reply. If you're going to keep interrupting this and delaying it without us achieving anything, you'll probably just end up getting muted, Councillor Croy. Can I go, please, to Councillor Murray?
That's your option, Mr. Mayor. That's your option. But this is a terrible way to treat members.
Oh. I think what we'll have to do is take this to the body that looks at these rules and see what we have and how we can deal with it in the future. But we're not going to be able to change the rules other than the guidelines we've been following now for several years. I do have to ask you, please, to accept my decision that I want to go to Councillor Murray to do a right to reply.
It's a terrible decision.
Mr. Mayor, can I speak now, please? Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to thank everybody that has spoken on this motion for the kind words that they've sent to the officers. This has been a huge piece of work, a huge undertaking that the officers have taken on, and I'm incredibly grateful to everybody that's spoken in favour of the work that they've done. Just to cover off a couple of the points that have been made by Councillor Cowan and Councillor Fruin. Yeah, absolutely. School transport, school allocations, planning. This will affect every single aspect of what we do as a council. That's why it is taking us as long as it is in order to be able to work through an action plan and to be able to do it and do it properly. And I'm pleased that we are giving it the due diligence that our residents deserve. To Councillor Jones talking about a COVID-19 memorial wood, I think that's an absolutely fantastic idea. I hope that the council can identify a piece of land in order to be able to support that. And I look forward to going with him at some point to be able to start planting the trees there. And the final thing that I'd like to say is that I find it absolutely incredible that there are some who have basically argued that this plan is both too ambitious and also not ambitious enough at the same time. I think it's one hell of a contradiction that has been coming out from some people. And I just ask that all members now vote with their conscience. As I said earlier on, you know, in 10 years' time, our children will thank us for voting in favour of this. And I personally would like all members to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. I'll now be taking this to a vote to go to the next stage. So I'll be taking the vote on the hands up facility, which means that we have to go through this as we did before. Could you first of all make sure, everybody, that your hands are down? Everyone. Yes, they appear to be down. So if we now ask that all those who wish to vote for this motion, please use the hands up feature now, and then we'll count them. This is 4.
Are we voting for the amended motion?
It should be said, Chair,
It is.
Mr. Mayor, it's the amended
Yes.
motion we're voting for. Thank you.
It is indeed, yes. All take your hands down now, please. Make sure everyone's down. And now, if you are against this, could you use the hands up?
Can you
Are they all down?
Mr. Mayor, can you wait till they're all down, please?
Right. They all need to be down. There are several that are still up. I don't know, that's early voting or what. Can you take them all down, please? Every one of them. Right, they all appear to be down. So we're now going to get the vote against. If you are going to vote against, please use the hands up feature now. Right, could you all take your hands down now, please? And when they're all down, no, still a few up. Right, so the third ones, those who wish to abstain. If you wish to abstain, please use the hands up feature now. The amended recommendation is agreed. All right. So following my plan. The amendments to the recommendation were agreed, and therefore it becomes the recommendation being debated as the substantive. Sorry? Remind. Right. Yes, everything went through okay there. In fact, I'm told that you don't need to do a further amendment because the amendments were accepted by the original proposer, and so we don't need to do a second vote on it. And they are therefore agreed. Councillor Croy, could you, because you're not speaking at the moment, could you turn your camera off, please, so that it improves the reception and lack of interference with signals? Right, so we now go to sorry. Sometimes you get a picture and no sound, sometimes the other way around. Right, so that was agreed. And now move to agenda item 39, which is the annual pay policy statement. This is to be proposed by Councillor John Halsall. So could you propose this, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the public questions from Louise Timlin referred to the annual pay policy, and it was referred to the statement in September. The pay policy is under section 38 to 43 of the Localism Act 2011, and it is a statutory requirement that we do this. So I'd just like to recommend that we adopt this annual pay policy statement, and I'd ask John Kaiser to second it, please.
Thank you. So Councillor Kaiser will be seconding. Do you wish to speak now, or do you want to reserve your right to speak later? Councillor Kaiser.
No, I'd like to speak now, Mr. Mayor. Get this over as quickly as possible, then we can get on to the motions. I mean, time's of the essence. I would just like to say that it's a very important document for all reasons, that people are paid a reasonable wage and they're paid equally as well, and diversity is taken into consideration. So I very much recommend this document, and I'm very glad to hear Councillor Halsall talking about a review in September with a view to reducing the pay gap by 1% per annum.
Thank you. So, Councillor Halsall, do you wish to come back and have a?
No, I'm fine. I think it's very self-explanatory, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to speak on this.
Now. Sorry. Yes, I've got a couple of hands up before we come back to you. Councillor Rachel Burgess, and after that, Councillor Clive Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to echo the point made by the resident earlier, and say that once again, I'm sorry to see there's no mention of the gender pay gap in this report. Now, I know it's not a legal requirement that it's included, but the guidance under which this document was prepared, which is referenced to section 1.3 of the document, does make reference to the gender pay gap, and specifically says the council should ensure that the council's pay structures are not discriminatory. As we've already heard, so since last year, the mean gender pay gap has increased to over 15%. So that's 9% higher than the local authority average, 10% higher than neighbouring Reading Borough Council. And the median gender pay gap is much worse. So the median gap is the difference between the midpoint in the ranges of earnings of men and women. This gap remains at 26%. So that's compared to Reading's 5%. It's clearly unacceptable that the average pay for men in the council is so much higher than the average pay for women. Last year I raised this same point and I was told in response in council that there's a number of women in higher paid positions. You know, it's as if the statistics in the report meant nothing to the executive. The only way to resolve this, just to sum up, the only way to resolve this gender pay gap is to proactively put measures in place. And these are exactly the kind of measures as referenced in the LGA guidance, which should be detailed in the council's pay policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burgess. And Councillor Clive Jones, next, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I would like to thank our personnel department for producing this annual report, which the council will no doubt approve. Living in this part of the country brings its challenges to employers, including Woking Borough Council, as they try to offer packages that will attract high calibre staff by paying competitive salaries. In these difficult economic times, we try very hard to do this, but we also have to make sure that we ensure that our lower paid staff also have proper rates of pay as well. We must continue to do our very best to ensure that the gap between higher and lower levels of pay continues to be narrowed. And I look forward to the ruling group bringing ideas to the Personnel Board in September. Mr. Mayor, the Liberal Democrat group will be voting to approve this pay policy statement.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Return very quickly again to Councillor Halsall. Would you like to have a right to reply before we go to the vote?
Only in that a lot of the issues that Rachel Burgess is raising have been continuously addressed. We have a huge cohort of women in a certain group who find it very convenient to work in Woking Borough Council, and to compare it with Reading, who has a substantial number of direct workers, which we have none, is a travesty. So I'd like to recommend this policy to Council to approve. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Halsall. So now intending to go vote on this recommendation. Now it's another one of these hands up and hands down things. Could we ask please to make sure everybody's hands are down before we go any further? Looking at this list, I can't see any hands up. Right, so it looks like we're starting off correctly then. So would you like to, if you're going to vote for, would you like to use the hands up feature now, please? Okay, so can you all put your hands down now? Please make sure they're all down. Every one of them. Still a few up. Right, they all look to be down. So the second stage is those who wish to vote against. If you want to go against, please use the hands up feature now, please. Right, so can you now put all your hands down? Look if they're all down. Still somebody's hand was up. That's gone down. Okay, so finally on this one, we want to do those who wish to abstain. If you want to abstain, please use the hands up feature now. Okay. Hands down, please. I can tell you the outcome is that it has been approved. It's agreed. Thank you. We now move on to agenda item 40, polling district changes, which affects Shinfield South area. I believe this is to be proposed by Councillor Barry Patman. Is Councillor Patman there, please?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Mayor. I believe that Councillor Charlotte Haytham-Taylor will be seconding this.
Good.
As well. And
you've offered it already. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is a fairly straightforward recommendation. I don't think there's need to talk too much about it. It's to correct a situation that is forcing people to walk to 2 polling stations when there's a vote that includes the parish and the borough council. And this is just correcting something, and I think the people of that area in 3 Mile Cross in particular will appreciate it if we. So I recommend we move forward with this recommendation, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Patman. Councillor Haytham-Taylor, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right to speak later?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very happy to speak now. As Councillor Patman said, it really is to correct an anomaly that we've got in our ward, whereby new residents who've moved in the last sort of 15 or so years and more recently have to walk past their nearest polling station in 3 Mile Cross and walk all the way to Spencer's Wood or even get in the car. And it just seems is a little bizarre, but that's what's happened, unfortunately. And we corrected the anomaly for the borough elections and also for the general elections, but it wasn't corrected for the parish elections. So this just corrects that. So I would very much like to recommend it to this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Back to you, Councillor Patman. Would you like to have your right of reply? Oh, there's a hand. I nearly missed a hand there. Sorry. Disappeared again. It's Councillor Fruin. Would you like to speak before I go back to Councillor Patman?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the other 2 councillors in my ward have said, it's a sensible suggestion, so I would fully support it. It would have been nice to have been involved before it came to council, but I guess that's not working as one team quite yet.
Thank you, Councillor Fruin. I'll just check in case there's another mysterious hand hiding somewhere. No, I can't see one. So, Councillor Patman, back to you if you'd like to have a right reply or not.
No, I don't think I need to. This is fairly straightforward. I think I'd like to move ahead with it.
Good, thank you. So we come back to all of these votes. Can you make sure all your hands are down, please? The hands absolutely down. Right. Just a second. Is that for this vote? Councillor Graham Howe, I understand your hands up facility is not working. Would you like to tell me how you wish to vote on this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My vote is for the motion. Did you hear that? The vote was for the motion. Fucking, I got.
So this is for the 4?
Yes, 4.
Yes, there's a lot of them up, so they're counting them now. Right, could you all put your hands down now? Are they all down? Still a hand up in the middle somewhere? No, okay, they're all down. Now, while they're down, the second vote is those who wish to vote against. Can you please use the hands up feature now if you are against? Okay. And right, so put the hands down again. Those that weren't up, make sure they're down. We now do the third one, which is anyone who wishes to abstain, please use the hands up feature now. Okay, so hands down. And the recommendation is agreed. Thank you. That's the end of that one. We move now to agenda item 41, the flag flying policy and room naming protocol. And this is to be proposed by Councillor John Halsall. Councillor Halsall, if you'd like to speak now, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a fairly innocuous document, but it summarises the national policy on flag flying and puts in a protocol for room naming and for flag flying our house flag. Regrettably, we've had 2 occasions recently to discuss flying flags, and on both occasions there were difficulties because of the fact that we didn't have a house flag. We now have one. There are rules which are specified in this document about other flags, and in particular the Union Jack. We can't fly the Union Jack as and when we would wish to. So this policy is fairly innocuous, but it now we can answer the question. If somebody says, can we fly this flag on a particular day, then we just refer to the policy and we've got an answer. So I recommend this to the council to approve. Thank you.
Thank you, very helpful. Councillor Kaiser, I believe you're seconding this.
Yes, that's correct.
Do you wish to speak now or reserve right to speak later?
Again, for brevity, I would wish to speak now. I don't need to say too much.
Do so. Yep.
Councillor, the leader has covered the points. I think it's important that the council have an outward show of support for organisations and for important events, calendar events. And I think it's also important that we have the opportunity, if we have anybody in the borough who we feel needs to be recognised, much as we have with the David Hicks room, that we have a policy that enables us to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. So at this stage then, would you like to have, hold on. If anyone else wants to speak on this, would they like to put their hands up now? Right, and the first person on that list is Councillor Imogen Shepard Dubai. Would you like to speak, please?
Oh, yes, I'm speaking now. Hopefully you can see me. First thing I want to say is that a Union Jack is only raised on a ship, not on a building. So it's a Union flag when it's on a building. But let's, because obviously that was mentioned then. So flags are signals loaded with emotion and meaning. They can be very controversial. They are an important message to the world around us, such that you can represent both hope and despair, both pride and deep offence if you get it wrong. With my additional role as a Wokingham Town Councillor, I feel that our flag poles that share the same town. It's important that both Wokingham Borough Council and Wokingham Town Council stay in unison when supporting nationally recognised dates. With the national flags, we welcome Woking Borough Council following the Flag Institute protocols, because that's what we use for full flag flying, which is what we also do at Wokingham Town Council. We also welcome Woking Borough Council's addition of the National Holocaust Day. It is not on the Flag Institute's list of official dates, and we will look to add it to our list for Wokingham Town Council. I'd like to know what Woking Borough Council's process is to get additional dates added, like the Holocaust Day, indeed. What is also missing from this protocol is the details of the rules around flying flags at half-mast. Is it intended that Woking Borough Council follow the Flag Institute rules on this too, in which case flying the Union flag at half-mast is reserved for the death of a member of a royal family or a Prime Minister? There have rarely been exceptions to these, and these are dictated from central government. As for other flags, the protocol is a start, but not clear enough. I have seen the St George flag flown over Chute End when England was playing football games in the World Cup, which is very admirable. However, it does not seem to flow for other sporting events or even things just like the Eurovision Song Contest. Where is the line being drawn, and who decides if this is offensive or not? We should be in here is the protocol where what should be in here is the protocol for when a councillor or other notable citizens die or other serious events. Sadly, we've recently had a funeral for a councillor on the town council, something that required our house flag representing the town to be respectfully flown at half-mast for that occasion. So now that Woking Borough Council have their own house flag, on what occasions will it be flown? We also need guidelines about adding flags. The Pride flag is flown over Westminster for London Pride, and was it therefore quite easy to acknowledge and support as a council. But what are the guidelines for us getting other flags added to this list? Our room naming is one thing that stood out. On the room naming, one thing that stood out is how many people are required in a petition to get a room renamed. Is it 10, 100, or 1,000? What is to stop 10 people signing a petition and recommending a name and getting it approved, or 100 or 1,000 people signing a petition and having the name rejected? While we will support this proposal in order to manage any disputes, these points really do need to be clarified. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next one is Councillor Gary Cowan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was considering a one-word amendment to the room naming protocol, but I would perhaps address the point to the leader of the council, and he may agree with me, in which case there be no need to proceed with it. And that is the final bullet point in the room naming protocol says the chief executive may consult with the relevant representative bodies. I would like to see that the chief executive will consult with the relevant representative bodies. It's a one-word change, and rather than go through all the hoo-ha of an amendment, I would wonder if the leader would accept that point.
Councillor Household, do you have a comment on that?
Mr. Mayor, if I'm entitled to, I will accept that point.
Thank you. Okay, we then move on to Councillor Andy Croy, please. Councillor Croy, you can speak on flags.
Thank you. Yes, I know. It's extraordinarily insensitive that this item has appeared on the agenda, and it should be withdrawn at once, right now. For members who are not on Facebook, following the appalling murder of Holt teacher James Furlong in June, there was a lot of support on Facebook for the suggestion that the Union flag be flown at half-mast, and it would have been a suitable response. No law would have been broken. In this country, there is a presumption that if you're not breaking the law, you can do it, and that applies to flying the Union flag. No law would have been broken. No one is going to jail, and no one is being fined. There is no law which tells us when to fly or not to fly a flag. If there is good reason for the Union flag to be flown at half-mast, then that is what we should do. Political leadership is not just about holding office. Political leadership is about being sensitive to the mood of our residents, and political leadership is about making sure our institutions are accountable. By agreeing to this proposal, we are effectively outsourcing our accountability, but it's worse than that. We are allowing our political leadership to hide behind bureaucracy. In June, there was widespread anger and bewilderment that we could not simply lower the flag. It would have been as simple as that. We should have lowered the flag. Does anyone really think that anger and bewilderment will be any less if there is another tragedy? This policy will ensure, as John has said, we continue to ignore our residents. At times of crisis, we need leadership, not hiding behind obscure policies. Now, it had occurred to me that this policy might be some sort of response to Black Lives Matter. After all, I did suggest to the leader that flying a flag saying Black Lives Matter would be an appropriate way to capture the outrage we feel over the murder of George Floyd and to express our collective commitment to ending racism and a statement of our values of equality and justice that we know are shared by our residents. I had thought this proposal might be a response to my suggestion, but I'm sure that can't be the case, can it? Ruling that option out, it seems clear that this policy is totally out of touch with the demand from local people that our institution, their institution, publicly reflect their anger and sadness at times of crisis. Please just withdraw this proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Croy. And the last hand up in the air at the moment is no, another couple. Councillor Carl Doran, please, if you'd like to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, to Imogen, the Union Jack story about ships is fake news, I'm afraid. If you go on the Flag Institute website, you'll find out I am a flag nerd. And I note that unlike the room naming protocol, I think it's already been mentioned this, the flag protocol seems to have no process detailed for how one might approach the council to fly a certain flag. And for instance, as a former member of the Royal Air Force, during this 80th anniversary year of the Battle of Britain, I would like to see the Royal Air Force ensign flown at Chute End on Battle of Britain Day, 15th of September. Now, I'm sure every single member in the chamber, or not in the chamber, would agree to that. But this protocol provides no way for me or any resident of the borough to approach the council, make such a request and have it considered. So I think this protocol needs further work to be complete. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doran. And yes, finally, Councillor Emma Hobbs, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to remind everybody, when I did my O-level history, there was a law brought out about 150 years ago, which has never been changed. The British Union Jack, or the St. George's flag, originally you needed permission from either the King or Queen of the country to fly it.
Right. Thank you. There are no more hands up there, so everybody.
Thanks, Emma.
I can't see any more hands. Councillor Kaiser, would you like to say anything at this point before we?
I have already have.
Yeah,
thank you very much. I think it's John Horsall to reply.
John, right, I misread the line above. Councillor Horsall, yes, if you're right to reply at this point. Do you wish to have one?
Mayor. Picking up sort of the reasonable requests. It does say on page 162 that individual requests for flying of specific flags would be approved in exceptional circumstances. So it does have that, which Councillor Doran raised. Thank you very much. Councillor Imogen, for the correction on the Union Jack and the Union flag. There is a policy in this document for flying flags of half-mast, and I'm really happy to meet with the leader of the Woking Town Council to discuss this. I think it would be very suitably discussed within the Constitutional Review Working Party. But in the meantime, I think that we have sufficient wriggle room in this document to do what we need to do, and I commend this policy to the members. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Horsall. I'm now going to go to the vote with the well-known hands-up process again. So can you please all make sure that your hands are down? Every hand is down. I can see a hand still up. Right. Now that they're all down, if you wish to vote for this item, would you now please use the hands up if it is for?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to vote for Councillor Graham Howell.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. Okay, can you all put the hands down again? That's like being at school, this, isn't it? Put your hands up. Can you put all your hands down, please? All of them down. Oh, clear display. They all look down. Right, so if you want to vote against this item, they're all down, yes. I can't see anyone up. Right, if they're all down, can you, and you want to vote against, can you please put the hands up for the against vote? Okay, right, take your hands down, those who've got them in the air, please put them down again. And the third and final part of this vote, if you wish to abstain, please use the hands up feature now. Now, could you take them all down again? And at this point, I can now tell you that the recommendation is agreed. Thank you for that item. We now move on to agenda item 42, which is member question time, for which we have 30 minutes and supplementaries are allowed. Again, can I remind you, as I did before, that executive members' responses to questions must be no longer than 2 minutes, and your original questions ought to be as brief as you can. And supplementary questions must be related to the original question or the answer, and no longer than 1 minute for those. So at this point then, can I invite Councillor Rochelle Shepard Dubai to ask her question of Councillor Gregor Murray, please.
Exactly how will we measure whether Heathrow's expansion is carbon neutral or not when you include all the extra planes and all the extra cars that will be parked in the new 50,000 space car park?
Thank you for your question, Rochelle. Good to see you. The Council has previously made public that the support of the expansion of Heathrow Airport is conditional on the need to reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases, including carbon emissions, and to demonstrate a clear pathway to carbon neutrality by all means, which may include offsetting. The need for the Western Rail access and associated improvements to the Twyford station area have also been identified as essential for the borough to ensure that there is less dependence on private motor vehicles to access Heathrow from Woking Borough and beyond. The Council has requested that Heathrow Airport demonstrate through monitoring at a suitable location within the borough that any increase in proposed number of overflights in Woking Borough have no adverse effect on the health and quality of life of our residents. In regards to the carbon on the ground, Heathrow has publicly committed to transition their fleet of cars and small vans to be fully electric or plug-in hybrid by 2025. To ensure vehicles at Heathrow meet ultra-low emission standards by 2025, Heathrow is currently investing in building a high-density electric vehicle charging network to support their business partners, as well as introducing an airside ultra-low emissions zone from 2025. The Council will closely monitor the realisation of these commitments and will call for action should the commitment not be met. Woking Borough Council is currently developing an electric vehicle strategy that will set the right policies and incentives to accelerate the adoption of zero carbon vehicles within the borough. This seeks to decarbonise emissions from transport over the next 10 years by working in collaboration with our residents and local businesses. Our annual report on climate emergency includes the carbon footprint for the Council. It will show specifically the carbon dioxide emissions from transport. However, these emissions report does not include Scope 3 emissions, which relate to air travel.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary?
Of course I do. Well, my question then is, why, since we're supposedly measuring these, what are we going to do about that if they don't meet it? And second of all, how are you going to stop all these cars from coming in there who are petrol based and the planes which are petrol based, unless you're making electric planes and all electric cars only?
Well, as I said, I mean, we're not referring to the Type 3 emissions that come from the aeroplanes. It's the responsibility of the aircraft companies and the airlines to take responsibility for their own emissions. We can't take responsibility for them. In terms of the number of cars, we can put in place strategies locally to ensure that we progress to a low emission vehicle as soon as we possibly can for ourselves and for our residents. And I forgot the beginning part of your question. I'm really sorry. I started at the back and worked forward, and I made a mistake.
Well, yes, you know, we have 50,000 cars possibly coming in there. That's not going to make any difference. We can't measure that. But what are we going to do about it? Are we going to remove our approval of the thing? Are we going to sit there and demonstrate? Are you going to?
I think the reality is all we can do is take responsibility for the areas that we have control over. And that means taking responsibility for working with our residents and helping them progress towards low emission fleets, and then demonstrating to the likes of Heathrow and other airports that it can be done, that we can lead by example, and that they should be following us.
Thank you for that. Fairly long one, that. Can I move on, please, to Councillor Maher, please, to ask his question of Charles Margetts.
Thank you. Before I ask the question, I just want to make sure I want to thank the council for all the hard work they've done in this area. And so I'm asking a very specific question. I want to acknowledge that the council has been and are doing to support the borough over COVID-19 pandemic. Unfortunately, it's now clear that members of the ethnic minority are likely to suffer more severe effects of COVID-19, resulting in higher than average mortality rates as compared to the non-ethnic minorities. Have the council considered this, and what specific actions have they taken to protect and support their employees and when working with the general public who are from the ethnic background?
Thank you for your question. Firstly, thank you also for your acknowledgement of the work done by council officers and councillors of all parties, basically, to support residents during the COVID pandemic. I mean, I've seen several members of your party at the food distribution hub, and the support from more people is very welcome. Specifically in answer to your question, a recent report by Public Health England identified a number of really major inequalities. The risk of dying following a positive test for COVID, LO1, is 70 times higher in people 80 years or older than those under 40, higher in males than females, higher in those living in the more deprived areas, and those living in the least deprived areas by times 2, and also higher in many Black, Asian, and minority ethnic groups than the white British ethnic group. In Wokingham, in answer to your question, we've designed an individual risk assessment to support employees and their managers to consider any additional measures that may need to be put in place to ensure employees are protected and fully supported. While there's no specific medical guidance available about what these protective measures should be, for ethnic minorities, we are recommending that the measures advised by the government for those who are classified as clinically vulnerable should be implemented.
Thank you. Yes, I go on to. Do you have a supplementary? Yes, you have a supplementary.
Yeah. In case we're in a similar situation to Leicester and Wokingham kind of has to shut down, would it be all of Wokingham, or would it be, say, for example, Early or Woodley or part of Wokingham, or would it be all of it?
Well, the answer to your question is the council has a separate body, basically chaired by my colleague Councillor Halsall, which includes all health professionals, local health professionals from Public Health England, the NHS, etc., which monitors this. Basically, your colleague Councillor Hare sits on it, and that would control the reaction to anything that did happen here. I think, being honest with you, it's likely we're going to have more cases, and we have to be honest about that. And I'd say to all residents to remain vigilant and follow the appropriate medical advice in terms of symptoms. The direct answer to your question is it would depend on how grave any outbreak would be. The council has published a plan which has been available for some weeks, 114 or 115 pages long, which outlines all the different scenarios should there be an outbreak in a school, community centre, a care home, a shopping area, etc., and what would happen. And that's available for the general public, and it's a very comprehensive plan and something I fully support, and contributed to by, I should say, not just officers from my own department, but officers from across the council.
Thank you, Councillor Margaret.
Thank you.
Councillor Gary Cowan, would you like to ask your question, please?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll ask the question standing in my name.
Thank you, Gary. Answer to your question. To date, the government's provided a number of funding streams to support the council and local social care market. NHS England published COVID-19 hospital discharge service requirements on the 19th of March. These requirements identified actions that had to be taken to enhance discharge arrangements and the provision of community support. This included the discharge 7 days a week within 2 hours. This did not include a cash incentive for care homes for hospital discharge. Woking Borough Council has done a lot to support care homes in an improved funding deal, prepayments to support with cash flow plus ability, help with PPE, regular advice and guidance, testing for staff with symptoms, and offer of access to care staff in an emergency. Woking Borough Council was allocated 1.8 million for the Adult Social Care Infection Control Grant. Funding will be provided in 2 equal instalments, and WBC has distributed the first instalment in with the grant conditions. 75% of that funding went straight to care homes within our geographical area to use on infection control measures. Funding was distributed in June 2020. 25% was passed to other commissions, adult social care providers, including home care and supported living. The grant is subject to a number of conditions, and the second payment will be subject to the satisfactory completion of the NHS Care Home Tracker and evidence that funding has been spent in terms of the grant conditions. There are a very large number of care homes in Woking compared to other unitary authorities in Berkshire. They're usually run by private or voluntary sector providers. Octalis Limited operates one care home, Suffolk Lodge, that provides residential care for 36 older people living with dementia who need the support of a secure environment and high-level care of staff.
Thank you, Councillor Margaret. 2 more to go. Councillor Shirley Boyd, please, if you'd like to ask your question of Councillor Jorgensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Children in Year 6 in our primary schools usually have the opportunity to participate in Level 3 of the Bikeability Scheme, having completed Levels 1 and 2 in the previous year. Unfortunately, due to COVID-19, they have been unable to do so. This is a particularly important level because the children get the opportunity to practice the route they will be taking to secondary school from September. I note from the My Journey webpage that Level 3 courses are running during the holidays in Twyford and Gorse Ride. Are there any further courses planned to enable Woodley and Early children to participate in this essential training?
Thank you very much for your question, Shirley. It's good to hear you again, although I can't see you. We agree that the Level 3 course is beneficial as part of the bikeability programme. Hello. The course is aimed at more confident cyclists who want to cycle on the roads over 30 miles an hour, cross multiple lanes and use complex junctions. Last year, Level 3 training was delivered at 4 primary schools and 3 secondary schools, with some additional summer courses. The most significant demand for bikeability training currently is for Level 1-2 training. We've seen 25 primary schools cancel or not book their training this year compared to previous years. Level 2 training is usually sufficient for both cyclists who travel to school, as it covers cycling on the road up to 30 miles an hour and encounters some cycling infrastructure. The Bikeability Trust has issued COVID-19 guidelines on how to deliver socially distanced courses with small groups of children. These guidelines have resulted in the Level 3 courses being particularly difficult to find suitable venues for. We're pleased to confirm that Willowbank Primary School have agreed to host both Level 2 and 3 bikeability courses in late August. These additional courses will be available for booking on the My Journey website shortly. Places are available on Level 3 course at Oakbank Secondary from tomorrow, it's 24th of July. The My Journey team are focusing on delivering further Level 2 courses at this time and finding more suitable venues in which to run this training from. Further Level 3 courses will be offered to secondary schools next year. If there's sufficient demand for further Level 3 training beyond this, additional holidays courses can be arranged. And if you want to have a chat separately and explain who would like to do it and where they think would be suitable, I'd be happy to follow up for you.
Thank you very much, Pauline. I just have one supplementary, if I may,
Yes,
Mr.
yes,
Mayor.
you may.
And that is that I note that the level 3 courses do incur a charge, whereas the level 1 and 2 are subsidised from the Department of Transport grant. Are there any ways that children from very low income families could do this training without paying the course or pay a reduced rate?
That's a very good question, and I'm very happy to follow up for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. And finally here we've got Councillor Andy Croy to ask his question of Gregor Murray.
Thank you. The climate emergency plan, Gregor, is not fit for purpose. The plan does not cause the borough to be carbon neutral by 2030. It's taken a whole year for this to be acknowledged. What changes to the plan will be made to ensure the borough reaches carbon neutrality by 2030?
Thank you for your question, Andy. The purpose of the Climate Emergency Action Plan is to provide a working document that acts as a planning tool. It provides an understanding of the Council's trajectory, the scale of ambition, and the complexity of the challenge ahead, identifying which actions need to be implemented to achieve the 2030 goal of net carbon neutral. This is a 10-year plan, and it is expected that this will change significantly over time as many of the actions will develop, new information emerges, and new actions are identified over the next few years. As a council, we are leading the way in being bold and aspirational by publishing an action plan that provides a high level of detail about our carbon targets and how we're planning to achieve them. Within the document, we establish that even if all of the actions in the plan are implemented, there will still be a shortfall of 72,000.67 kilotons from the aspirational net zero target by 2030. This is an important piece of information that the action plan has helped us to identify so we can understand what more needs to be done to become net carbon zero. The Council will seek to close the gap by continually reviewing the action plan, providing more accurate carbon savings against individual actions and projects as were introduced and developed. Despite the Council's best efforts, many of the outcomes rely on factors which are outside the Council's control. The effective delivery of this action plan depends on influence and support of multiple agencies, stakeholders and businesses, town and parish councils, the University of Reading. The Council is committed to working in partnership to achieve these ambitious goals. Responsibilities will be made clear in future iterations of the action plan. Central to delivering the climate emergency targets is engaging with our residents and the community so that they can become an integral part of the borough's response to climate emergency. The Council will also develop behavioural change and engagement programmes that will support our residents at different stages of this journey. The plan has been reviewed independently by our partners in the Climate Emergency Advisory Board, which is formed of representatives of organisations and businesses, charities and academia, including the University of Reading, National Grid, Greater South East Energy Hub, the chairman of the Woking Business Group, Subtrans, Scottish Electric. I will stop there because I appreciate the amount of time.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you have a supplementary at all?
Yes, I do. Thank you for that answer, Gregor. I think there are 317 milestones in the plan. 84 of them have no impact at all. There's a lot of puff in this plan. A lot. I can just draw your attention to one part of the plan. To have 50% of new vehicle registrations to be electric vehicles. According to the plan, that would kill 45,000 tons of carbon per year. Now that's an absurd statistic. 50% of electric vehicles is just of new vehicles to be electric is just 900. It's not going to do anything like that. The real figure for that part should be 2,000. So in just 30 seconds, we've taken away 20% of the carbon savings you think you're going to make, or we think this plan is going to make. The fact is, this plan does not add up, does it?
Yeah.
As I've said, Councillor Croy, the action plan is a living and breathing document. Things are going to come into it, things are going to come off of it. You raised this point in terms of new vehicle registrations during the Task and Finish group, and I promised to get you an answer on that, and we will get you one. But I genuinely believe that this is taken our carbon budget down significantly already. There are more plans, more programs in the works in the background that we're doing the due diligence on, that we need to evaluate on behalf of our residents. We've got to do it properly. New targets, new initiatives will come onto this plan over the next 10 years. I'm sorry that you don't believe that that is the case, but Many actions have come on over the last year, and that have taken our carbon emergency plan down, our carbon budget down, footprint down. More will come, and things like solar farms were not pre-existing actions. They're new to our plan. They're going to take our carbon footprint down massively. I'm disappointed that you don't agree with that. They voted against the climate again.
Gentlemen, can you both come to a halt, please? We're running over time on the length of the questions and the answers. Thank you. So at the end of that item, we now move to agenda item 43, minutes of committee meetings and ward matters, for which is a maximum of 20 minutes allocated, and there are no supplementaries. I have got a short list of members who wish to ask questions, but if anyone else wishes to ask a question, could they please let me know by using the hands up feature? But I'll begin with Councillor Maria G, please.
So this is a question for the Executive Member for Highways and Transport, or possibly the Executive Member for Planning and Enforcement. In January, I asked about unpavement advertising in Wokingham Town Centre, and Councillor Pauline Jorgensen responded there was no need for a new policy on on-pavement advertising. I appreciate the need to have due regard to businesses during these difficult times, but when you, Pauline, made the decision in January not to develop such a policy, in what way did you give due regard to the public sector equality duty, specifically the need to advance equality between people who share protected characteristics and people who do not? With whom did you consult from people who share protected characteristics, such as the elderly and those with disabilities, before making that decision? Our elderly and disabled residents are being denied equal opportunity to take part in business and social life in the town centre. Soon more alfresco drinking and dining licences will be issued, and we need to design our town so that social distancing is possible. The landscape of town centres is changing. Will you now consult widely to develop a policy for on-pavement advertising that is fair to all residents? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Maria. Yes, as you know, I did consult with you, and I also consulted with one resident that was complaining about the pavement advertising. I also talked to the planning authority, the planning officers, and I also talked to highways officers. And the conclusion we came to was that there is a current policy which, if implemented and if enforced, would actually deal with the problem. As a result of that conversation with highways officers, we had people going around the town centre, talking to local businesses and encouraging them to move their A boards off the highway. And I had a recent report today from one of my colleagues that said that when you were complaining about A boards on the highway and pavement, there were actually all A boards were on the shop precinct. So obviously going around talking to people did work. We really need to encourage the businesses in Wokingham Town at the moment. And I agree that we do need to also make sure that the sign's not dangerous. And I think we have the policy to do that. And I'm currently talking also to the planning guys to make sure that that's the case.
As you know, there isn't a policy.
There's no supplementaries on this, I'm afraid.
And the report.
Sorry, excuse me.
Sorry, there is no supplementary.
More, please write to me.
I didn't ask a supplementary. I made a promise. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chris Bowring, would you like to ask your question, please? Councillor Bowring?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. If I had my hand up, it was a mistake.
Oh, it's still up, see.
I beg your pardon.
Yes. Councillor Croy, would you like to speak again, please? Next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You stopped calling me Andy. I'm shocked. My question is for Pauline, Executive Member for Highways. Pauline, I've been contacted by a resident in Bruce Road in Woodley who's very, very disappointed, as are his neighbours, about the quality of a recent resurfacing work that was undertaken there. I was wondering, would you and perhaps an officer like to come with me to Bruce Road and to explain to residents about the quality of the road?
I would be delighted to. I've already been to speak to residents in Early, and I've been to speak to residents with Jim Pruin in Shinfield. Be happy to. I think one of the things that we as councillors need to do is explain to local residents how the micro-asphalting process, for example, works and how long it takes to settle down, because I think expectations need to be managed, and that's part of our joint duty.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting one for you.
Yep.
Okay. Right. Councillor Bowring, would you like to speak next, please? Or was that also a mistake? The hand still stuck up, is it? No. Okay, it's disappeared. Okay. Councillor Gary Cowan, please. Would you like to speak next? Councillor Cowan? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Councillor Hobbs, would you like to speak next, please?
Mr. Mayor, I just want to say that I made a decision not to ask my question so that we could have enough time for the debate of motions.
Indeed.
So I would like this minuted, please.
Okay. What's your comment to be minuted? Okay. Councillor Tahir Ma, would you like to speak next, please?
Yes, similarly, I'm going to withdraw my question probably for till next time, because I want, in the interest of saving time, so we can get to the motions.
Good, thank you. I'll have another opportunity. I'll try Councillor Gary Cowan again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is addressed to the Leader of the Council. I'd like to point out I did have a supplementary to my question, but I was denied the opportunity to mention it. It's fairly clear that there are 7 Conservative questions which are all really non-political and of interest to members and the public at large, yet none of them have been asked. Also, executive and NED statements are being pulled to try and get the business done, which I welcome very much, but it's still unlikely to complete the business. So will the Leader of the Council agree with me that the Council process is still broken as it fails to deliver what it was designed to do? Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And last name on the list I've got here is Councillor David Hare. Would you like to ask your question, please? Councillor Hare.
Sorry, Mike. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I'd like to save my question to the next council meeting so that we can get on with the motions.
Thank you very much for that. So that takes us to the end of item 43. We now move to agenda item 44, which is statements by the leader, executives and deputy execs. Again, we have a maximum of 20 minutes for this. Can I ask Councillor John Halsall to make his statement, please?
Mr. Mayor, I promised this would be a very brief statement. It is only to announce a small change to Councillor Murray's responsibilities and title. To become...
Is a goat somewhere?
It's not in my garden. It is to announce a small change to Councillor Murray's responsibilities and title to become the executive member for resident services, communications and emissions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The next item is statements from council-owned companies, which I think you we withdrew earlier on in the session. So that falls. We now go on to agenda item 46, which is the bigger one, and that's motions, and it's 30 minutes per motion. And the first motion on the list is number 432, and the proposer here is Clive Jones. Could Councillor Clive Jones please propose the motion?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. As councillors, we all know that future housing development is one of the main issues on our residents' minds. Wokingham over the last 20 years has taken more than its fair share of new houses. However, more new homes are being forced on us by the Conservative government. The last few council leaders have told us, and I have no reason to disbelieve them, that they have been in many discussions with ministers about getting the numbers reduced. Last year, Wokingham Borough Council spent over £50,000 on a survey of all households in the borough to get residents' views on what was appropriate future development. This revealed that 95% of residents didn't want lots more development, something that we already knew. But we hoped the confirmation of this might change the government's minds about numbers, but it hasn't. It hasn't, they aren't listening, and the new housing numbers are still over 800 a year. This motion asks for the council to invite ministers and senior civil servants to come to Wokingham, to meet with residents, to get their views firsthand. We also want to include councillors from all of the political parties in these discussions, including town and parish councillors and community groups. We want to let residents have the opportunity to change the minds of ministers and civil servants. We want them to see for themselves the semi-rural nature of the borough that would be destroyed forever if we have to accept the high number of new homes that they are forcing on us. This way, ministers and senior civil servants will have the opportunity to understand the depth of feeling that there is currently regarding housing numbers. This may then increase our chances of getting a reduction in numbers from the current 800 plus that's proposed by the government to something that is more manageable and acceptable to residents across the borough. Please vote in favour of this very sensible motion.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I neglected to ask you who your seconder was. I know you have one because it's on the list. I neglected to ask you who it was. Would you like to inform me, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the seconder is Councillor Shepard Dubai.
Thank you. So you've spoken to Councillor Jones. Councillor Shepard Dubai, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right to speak later?
I'll speak now because that way we'll get it out of the way and other people can speak.
Okay, thank you.
Whilst the North and the West of England are crying out for more new homes, the government seems to only be focusing on building new homes in the Southeast. Our levels of housing has been kept high and has not taken into account the changes in the economy caused by the delayed response to COVID-19 and the oncoming likely detrimental financial impact of no-deal Brexit many in the ruling party want. It is not time to actually adjust housing numbers to prevent. It is time to actually. Sorry about that. It is time to actually adjust housing numbers to prevent a continuous urban sprawl from London to Reading. The sprawl is putting extra pressure on the already stretched and poorly funded Wokingham Borough services for residents. We ask government ministers and the civil servants to visit and see what is happening in the suburbanization of Wokingham from a market town to merely a place to live for London's workers. The present WBC administration has claimed they have spoken to ministers, but seems to have been ignored by their Tory colleagues. They spent a lot of money asking residents whether they thought there were too many houses being built. I could have told them very easily, and so could almost any other councillor. The money could have been used to fund some youth workers, which we desperately need, or a contribution to charities helping people who need help to survive. If the current government removes some planning powers away from our council, it won't let us redesign Wokingham new homes and could allow developers, not the council, to decide where and what they want to build. I asked the council to sign the cross-party LGA planning letter to the government, stating that we don't believe this is the right idea. We also asked the government to let WBC choose the types of housing to be built to help our young people get on the housing ladder and some of our elderly residents to downsize their homes to dwellings that would be more useful for them at this point in their life. We also need to require all new estates to have adequate numbers of truly affordable homes actually built in the estates rather than giving commuted sums which seem to be rarely used to build more additional affordable housing. Wokingham is a great place to live and we'd like to keep it that way and help our residents keep it that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. There's a whole list of people who've put their hands up to speak. Without me having to say, is there anyone who wants to speak? Councillor Wayne Smith, would you like to speak next, please? You're on the list.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor. I have an amendment. I believe you have a copy there of an amendment that I would like to propose a change to this motion.
Do you have a seconder for it?
Yes, John Hossel.
Thank you. Okay. Would you like to speak first?
I'll reserve my position. It's not big. There's only minor changes, but I think it's important that this isn't just has been referred to as a Tory government issue. This is all governments have had an issue.
Sorry, Councillor Smith, you can't reserve your opportunity to speak. You do need to speak now before I ask the seconder whether they want to speak later.
Okay, yeah, okay. So I'll continue then. As I've said, that this isn't just happened in the last few years. This has been successive governments, including Labour, Coalition, and the Tories. We have worked very hard, and these are. Before I speak on it, there are very few items on here that I would like to change as an amendment, and you can see in bold writing as you're looking at it now. Do you want me to read it out?
Yes, let's have a look. It's about 3 paragraphs, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, council political leadership to more than double, because I will quite happily go through what we've been doing in the last 2.5 years and all the meetings we've had, both political meetings and non-political meetings, get non-biased with various QCs and doing our own consultation, which had the best ever response across Woking and Borough. And then if you read further down where it said, therefore like to again and again invite ministers, because they have invited from the Prime Minister down, not just the current Prime Minister, but previous Prime Ministers. And then the last paragraph, high housing numbers that have been forced on us by successive Labour, Lib Dem and Conservative governments.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Halsall, do you want to speak now, or do you want to reserve your time to speak later?
Right. I'll speak now, no worries.
Okay, thank
sorry,
you.
I was silent.
Right.
I have lived in this neck of the woods for more than 50 years. Berkshire was a rural county. Woking was a sleepy market town. Development has been consistent and substantial. I would have been more than happy to support Clive's motion, except for the fact that he attributed housing numbers to the present government. This is far from the truth. The rot started with the Labour government when it promoted the South East Plan. Through this, the housing requirement from Woking Borough was increased by 2,500 dwellings. This was based on specific identified development sites rather than a general housing need or ambition. This has flowed through as a base every year since. Housing numbers have been established upon statistical growth adjusted upwards for a factor which seeks to overbuild to reduce house prices. So every house built becomes future growth and the determinant for future housing numbers. This overbuilding has never and will never achieve the reduction in prices envisaged. The housing numbers grow exponentially. With a standard method, the number will always increase every time a new local plan is adopted. The requirement for new local plans now has increased to every 5 years. The 2010 core strategy, masterminded by the then executive member for local and regional planning, Gary Cowan, compounded during the Lib Dem Conservative coalition. The housing numbers increased. We must have a local plan. To not do so, we are vulnerable to speculative development. Woking is 87% countryside. It is idle speculation to assume that COVID will reduce housing numbers. The evidence so far is that it is increasing demand. Government and opposition parties see housing as a necessity and a driver for growth. The argument I am pressing is that with the levelling up agenda, we should build less in the north, in the south, and north more. So we must continue simply on both fronts to produce a valid plan and convince government to use the housing numbers. Every day, in some way, I'm engaged on this and will continue to do so until we've won our case. I was yesterday at the LGA pleading my case. I see each of our MPs once a week to plead my case. I wrote to Boris today, and I wrote to Boris a week ago, and I wrote to Theresa May. Currently, it seems impossible to establish a dialogue with the MHCLG, so I may have to do something more vivid to gain the MHCLG's attention. Maybe parading naked with the banner in Whitehall. I trust the opposition political leaders and members will join me. Clive, I invite you to.
Thank you, Councillor Helsall. Having heard Councillor Smith,
It's on the website.
Having heard Councillor Smith and Councillor Helsall, can I ask if you accept the amendment?
I would accept the amendment if we take out the references to the different governments. So take out the reference to the Conservative government, Labour government and the coalition government. We would accept the amendment then.
Just seek some advice on this for the moment. If you bear with me, I'll take my camera and sound off.
It's a bit difficult. I haven't got it in front of me, Wayne.
No, sorry, Croy. Could we say, as you've just said, past and current governments? I'd be happy with that. Did you hear that, Malcolm? Mr. Mayor?
You'd like to get rid of the names of the various governments, just say previous governments or past and current?
Yeah.
Is that acceptable to you?
Yes. Yes, it is.
In that case, Councillor Smith, you accept the, Councillor Jones, you're going to accept the amendment?
Yes.
You've agreed to accept it.
With that thinking from Councillor Smith.
Yeah.
Yes. So in that case, if you accept the amendment, it becomes a substantive motion and we have to go through a process. I think if it's already accepted, we can discuss it. Just a moment. Thank you. I'm glad that's done. So what happens now, because you've accepted that, we can return to the debate, and I have a list of names here from people who had their hands up. So can I now go to Councillor Cowan, please? Councillor Gary Cowan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I would say is John Halsall is completely wrong in his comments about me and the South East Plan earlier on. It's too big an issue to discuss here. But what I will say is that it was the Labour government who brought in the South East Plan, but it was a Conservative government who withdrew it. But then the councils all carried on with the numbers that were assigned to them under the Labour plan. But what I will say is the council opened Pandora's box in 2013 when it secretly increased the housing numbers from 2013 onwards without any consultation with the residents whatsoever. And we owe a debt of gratitude to the Lib Dems for bringing this secret Conservative plans for 15,000 houses at Graiseley to the public's attention. I wonder, having opened Pandora's box, if it's too late to close it now. I'm inclined to think it is. Graiseley still sits prominently as the Conservatives' chosen site for development, backed up by Shinfield, Arborfield and Barkham, while the Greenfields in the north of the borough remains virtually untouched. This is a deliberate policy to protect the Conservatives north of the borough and make the southern parishes take the thousands of houses about to be dumped on us, along with the serious environmental damage that will have on our remaining green fields. The well-being of all our communities in the south in social, health and community welfare terms would appear to be irrelevant in the eyes of the Conservative environmental butchers. And I'll say that again, environmental butchers. The climate emergency plan has several sites planned for solar energy, and I have no doubt they will be sited on more green fields, not far from the green fields where the thousands of new houses will be built in the south of the borough. There'll be no need for solar energy in the north of the borough, as no houses will be there. Just watch this space and you will see what I mean. The Conservatives, by trying to go to government and say we're against all these houses, have got to recognise for 7 years they have secretly allowed the numbers to build up and up and up, and it's probably too late. I welcome Clive's motion and I will fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cowan. We now go on to Councillor Jim Fruin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear?
Yes, I can hear you.
Right. As an independent, I don't need to go into the party political game of blaming different parties. All I know is the impact of housing within my ward in Shinfield. We've been through many consultations, many plans, local plans, neighbourhood plans, and none of them have been worth the paper they're written on. We've even had previous leaders offer to bring forward by a number of years housing to try to keep a 5-year plan, housing plans going. All of that on one area of community. We've very nearly tripled in size. I would happily join the naked walk down through Westminster, though my flag would probably be flying at half-mast, John. We have to do something. At this moment in time, we are very close to destroying 3 communities and merging them into one great big housing estate. By size and by number of houses, Shinfield, Spencer's Wood, 3 Mile Cross and potentially Graiseley will be the biggest housing estate in Europe. That cannot be allowed to happen. So I support this wholeheartedly.
Thank you. And we now have Councillor Andrew Middleborough, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am very happy to support this important amended motion. Ministers and senior civil servants must be invited again in the very strongest possible terms to meet with and listen to the enormous number of local residents who are, quite understandably, extremely concerned about the excessive number of homes that the government requires to be built in our borough. In February 2019, the National Audit Office concluded that the planning system in England was not working well, leaving large swathes of England vulnerable to the wrong houses being built in the wrong places. In August of that year, 94% of the just under 50,000 responses to Wokingham Borough Council's housing target consultation said the housing target set by the government was too high. The pandemic has and will continue to change people, the economy and society. This includes all sorts of impacts on housing in our borough, such as the effects that long-term increases in working from home will have on demand for home workspaces and the configuration of homes, and increased preferences for access to green spaces. Less predictable, but by no means less important, is the impacts of the pandemic in Wokingham Borough on the appropriate number of new homes that need to be added to our housing stock each year. The UK government has acknowledged the potential for a green economic recovery from the pandemic, encapsulated in the slogan, "Build Back Better." This must include all matters relating to housing. There is a wonderful window of opportunity to respond to this, but the response in terms of housing must not be homogenised. Local circumstances, needs and wishes vary. Ministers and civil servants must visit Wokingham Borough and listen to our residents. Okay. The invitation to visit our borough must be sent with great urgency, as the potential harms, if immediate action is not taken, are very real, significant and irreversible. Thank you.
We've brought you close. Thank you. And the next person on the list is Councillor Stephen Conway, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I commend this timely motion to Council.
and hope it will receive support from all political groups. Now is the moment to renew the effort to persuade central government that the quantity of new housing imposed on our borough is far too large. Even before Brexit and COVID-19, the housing allocation greatly exceeded local needs. Now, with very different economic conditions, planning to expand housing provision on this scale makes no sense at all. A further consideration, and one that should give us hope that the government might think again, is the government's own political commitment to boosting economic activity in the North and Midlands, the areas where it made gains in the last general election. If we are to see a return to a regional policy that takes jobs to the workers in the North and Midlands, rather than obliging workers there to move south, then there will be even less need for overdevelopment of our area. There are good reasons then to believe that the situation has changed radically since the council last tried to convince government that our housing allocation needs to be scaled back dramatically. We should seize the opportunity to show the determination of all councillors to protect our area from excessive, unwanted and unnecessary development. Please support this motion.
I've already had Jim through in. Good, thank you. Right.
Rather than waste time, shall I start with my comments very, very quickly, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
It is just a minute. One of the great beauties of this council is the opportunity to, at the beginning of the month, watch almost every member of this council vote for an extra runway at Heathrow, which will stimulate economic growth in the Thames Valley and will stimulate the demand for housing. And then at the end of the month, we're complaining about too many housing. These things are related. It's quite, I'm not sure if it's bizarre or entertaining, but it is as weird as hell, I'm telling you that. The second thing is, we will support the motion. We're missing a key person. Unless you invite Dominic Cummings down and ask him to have a look around our beautiful villages, you are wasting your time. You are wasting your time. It's not the ministers. They're not responding to John because they don't like him. It's because Dominic Cummings has told them not to bother. My final point is the Conservatives have just won and fought an election on a premise to rip up planning as we know it, and they are going to introduce zonal planning. That's what they fought the election on. That's what they are going to do. I understand why the local Conservatives are now sort of trying to row back from that. That makes sense. That's all I want to say on that.
Thank you, Councillor Croy. Andy or Councillor Croy, whichever you prefer. Finally, Councillor Jones, would you like to have the right to reply?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. I am really, really very, very pleased that we're going to invite, or it looks as if we're going to invite ministers and senior civil servants to come here and visit Wokingham and to see ordinary residents, to see councillors from right across the board, to see town and parish councillors, so that they really do understand the depth of feeling that that there is about housing numbers. I would ask John and any others who have influence with Robert Jenrick and any of his personal staff that you actually get hold of him and make sure that he comes here to give all of our residents the opportunity just to have a nice civilized chat. So
take him for lunch.
Let's make this happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. So at that point then, we now will go to the vote on the motion. And that's the original plus the amendments. And we're going to do the hands up system again. So can I ask first of all to make sure every one of your hands up signals are down? Just make sure all the hands are down. And now, if you are going to vote for this, would you please use the hands up feature now?
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Howe, I will be voting for the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Howe.
Councillor Ross will also be voting for the motion.
Yes, this, if you want to be 4, you should have your hands up right now. Okay, right. Now that they've noted that, could you put all your hands down, please? Make sure they're all absolutely down, not a single one up. Otherwise, it screws up the count. Right, now that they're all down, or it looks like it on my screen, if you wish to vote against this, could you please use the hands up feature now? Okay, can you now, someone wishing to speak? No? Can we all take the hands down again? So there are no hands. I'll just check if I can see that. Yeah, I can't see any hands still up. Good. So we now move to the third bit, which is that if you wish to abstain, can you please use the hands up facility now to indicate abstention? Thank you. I can announce that the thing is carried. It's agreed. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, could I raise standing order 4212M and ask for an extension of the meeting as it is now after 10 o'clock?
Right, bear with me. I'll just get my piece of paper. Yes, do you have a seconder?
Second that proposal.
Who's the name? Sorry, the second one?
It's Prue, Malcolm.
Yes, so the seconder I meant.
I seconded it now, Stephen Conway.
Okay, thank you. So we need to go through the vote on that. Are your hands down? Everyone's hands down, please. Yeah, they all look down. If you wish to vote for, i.e. to extend the meeting by half an hour, please use the hands up feature now.
Councillor Howe voting for.
Thank you.
Councillor Swaddle voting for.
Thank you. So if you've got your hands up.
Councillor Ross voting for.
Thank you. Okay, so now take the hands down, please. Everyone who's got them up, please take them down. Now, if you wish to vote against extending the meeting, please use the hands up feature now to show abstention. Sorry, against. Right, can you put the hands down again now, please? So we've had the for, we've had the against. Now, if you wish to abstain, please use the hands up feature now. I can tell you that it has been agreed and the meeting will continue until 11 p.m. tonight. Thank you. So we were, I've forgotten where I was now, on the thing we carried. So now we're on to the second motion. Yes. Turn my pages over this way. This is 433, which is proposer is Councillor Gregor Murray. Would you like to speak now, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and Laura Blumenthal will be seconding this motion for me.
Thank you,
Mr. Mayor, declaring climate emergency has put the impact that we have on our environment front and centre in all that we do. While all primary focus has to be on dramatically reducing our carbon footprint, that focus shouldn't allow us to abdicate our other environmental responsibilities. Single-use plastics have become one of the biggest environmental challenges our world has known, and it would be irresponsible of us not to act against them when we have the opportunity. Thanks to plastics, countless lives have been saved. The growth of clean energy and other technologies has been enabled, and the way food is stored and preserved has been revolutionised. But the convenience and low cost of plastics has resulted in them being thrown away within minutes of being first used rather than recycled. Our oceans have been used as a dumping ground, choking marine life. In cities around the world, plastic waste clogs drains, causes flooding and breeds disease. Consumed by livestock, it also finds its way into almost all areas of our food chain. Mr. Mayor, the Great Ocean Garbage Patch is a floating plastic landfill island in the Pacific Ocean the size of Texas. Even with charging, over 1.1 billion single-use plastic bags were sold by large retailers last year. The average amount of time they were used for is just 12 minutes. Due to the food chain infiltration, the average person consumed 70,000 microplastic particles each year. That's an average of 100 bits of plastic entering your stomach each meal. The UK produces over 5 million tonnes of plastic waste a year, most of which comes from food and drink packaging. Over 900,000 tonnes of that waste comes in the form of plastic bottles, which require 106 billion megajoules of energy to produce. That's the equivalent of 17.6 million barrels of oil. Put another way, 106 billion megajoules is enough energy to power 33.6 million 60-watt light bulbs for a century. Conversely, recycling one plastic bottle can generate enough energy to power a 60-watt light bulb for 6 hours. RE3 already recycle more than 800 tonnes of Woking Borough's plastic each year. This, however, equates to only approximately 44% of the total plastics that households in the borough utilise every year. We have to do more. Compared to other councils, our recycling rates are very strong, but clearly we are better not using the single-use plastics in the first place. That, Mr. Mayor, is why I've put forward this motion, to remove all unnecessarily single-use plastics from Woking Borough Council, our operations and supply chain as soon as possible. We accept that there are situations where single-use plastics are the best solution for an issue. For example, there are many within our population who have hidden or visible disabilities and who can only eat or drink with the aid of a flexible plastic straw. We also know that our blue bags, while single-use, act to reduce residual waste and increase our recycling rates. The introduction of food waste has also served to reduce the number of the blue plastic bags that the borough uses every year. There is need for exemptions in cases such as these, and I call on officers at Woking Borough Council to use their discretion in these situations. There are, however, many more incidents where single-use plastics such as water bottles, food containers and disposable packaging wrappers can be eliminated, and I call on council officers and the council suppliers to reduce and eliminate such items from use and their supply chain and all council controlled properties as quickly and as thoroughly as possible.
Councillor Murray, can I ask you to try and draw your...
I have one more paragraph to say, Mr. Mayor.
If it's quick.
There have to be some exceptions, Mr. Mayor, such as in the case of health and well-being of our residents. But otherwise, from now on, let there be no excuse for single use.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Blumenthal, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right to speak later?
Yes, please. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to speak now. Thank you.
Speak now, certainly. Please do.
We can all agree that Sir David Attenborough is an incredible man. I am quite the fan. He's done so much to open our eyes to what we're doing to the environment and especially how single-use plastics impact it. Blue Planet 2 came out and completely galvanised the UK public to realise what was happening and what we needed to do. And this includes our local residents. We know they're doing their bit. Many are busily recycling their reliance on single-use plastics, including school children. We need to play our part if we're going to take more residents with us in our green ambitions. This motion is building on what is already happening within the council. There's a green team of officers passionate about the environment, helping council buildings address single-use plastics. For example, if we're in the council chamber right now, there wouldn't be plastic cups anymore, but biodegradable ones. We've already made great progress. There is further to go and there is an appetite for it. This is about empowering the council to lead by example, to expand the good work already being done and also help local schools and businesses reduce single-use plastics. This will be a commitment to make the right environmental choices and make these choices easier for council colleagues and the people who live, learn and work in a borough. This is positive. It's not about guilt tripping or being sanctimonious. If Barbara goes to Greg's and brings back a packaged sandwich, she's not going to be escorted out. This is a relatively easy win, which will make a real difference. If we're encouraging residents to be green, we need to make it easier within council buildings to do just that and supports schools and businesses to do the same. When we're discussing our plans within the council, if it's investments or planning, a lot of decisions can reach far into the future, many decades ahead, long after we will cease to be councillors. A plastic cup can take over 400 years to break down. This motion may seem simple, even frivolous to some, but it undoubtedly will have one of the longest impacts on the environment that any of our policies could make. I recommend this motion to the council.
Thank you, Councillor Blumenthal. At this point, I would ask anyone else wish to speak.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yes,
I have
who's
a
speaking?
point of order.
Yes.
Under section 4.2.13.1, the Constitution states that the Mayor will ask if any member wishes to speak against the motion. If no one wishes to speak against the motion, the Mayor will put the matter to the vote. I don't believe anyone will want to speak or vote against this motion. In fact, this is something the executive member should have just carried out without bringing to council. But if no one wishes to speak against, per the Constitution, this should go straight to the vote. Thanks.
Yeah, just hold on a moment and I will just... I need to ask, does anyone actually wish to speak against this motion, or are you in fact all in favour? Does anyone like to put their hand up if they want to indicate that they want to speak against the motion?
No, we're all in favour. Let's just vote on it. All in favour.
Councillor Ross has asked that he wants to make a comment. I don't know whether that's for or against. So, Councillor Ross, would you like to speak briefly? Tell me. No, I think it must have been a mistake. Maybe the hands disappeared. So therefore, we can assume that everybody would be in favour. No one's going to speak against. In which case, we are able then to. Right, it's what I thought, which is that we don't need any more discussion. But Councillor Murray does have a right of reply if he wishes to take that, and then we'll go to the vote.
Mr. Mayor, all I would like to say is to all of our councillors, thank you for supporting this motion. I greatly appreciate it.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Murray. So we're now going to go to the vote. As before, favourite pastime, hands up facility. So can you all make sure that your hands are down, please? Everything is down. Are they all down? I hope they're all down. I can't see any sticking up. So, yes, there's... No, that's gone down now. Right, we're assuming everything is down. So if you wish to vote for this, can you please use the hands up feature now to vote for?
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Howe voting for the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Howe.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Alison Swaddle voting for the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Swaddle. In theory, this I imagine ought to be quite quick counting these votes. Right, I think we had long enough. So can you put all your hands down again now, please? Make sure all the hands are down. Some of them are still up. Please take them all down. Right, a couple left. They're going down, going down. Yes, they're all down. Right, so we now move to those who wish to vote against. The hands up. In theory, there shouldn't be any of these since you've all just gone to the vote on the basis there is no one against it. However, we have to go through the process. If you wish to vote against, use the hands up feature now. Just got to count the absence of hands. Right, okay, so if you anyone who did have a hand up for any reason, can you make sure that's down, and we'll go then to the abstentions. If you wish to abstain, could you please use the hand up feature now? Thank you, and the result of that is that the motion is carried. Thank you. We now move on to motion 434. Proposer is Councillor Sarah Carr. Would you like to speak, please, Councillor Carr?
Thank you. Just to clarify, my surname's pronounced Kerr.
Kerr. Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Yes, and your seconder, please. Do you have a seconder?
It's Councillor Paul Fishwick.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like now to speak? You have, as you know, up to 3 minutes.
Thank you. Climate change and air pollution are not the same thing. They are linked, but different. The measure of success in tackling climate change is reducing our emissions of carbon dioxide, and the impact is global. Air pollution, on the other hand, is more localised and measured differently. Whilst pollutants do move about, for the most part, the pollution we create in our communities is the pollution that we breathe in. A large proportion of air pollution comes from road transport. Road transport release gases such as nitrogen oxides, or NOx, and sulfur dioxide, as well as small particles. It is the fine particles, PM 2.5s, that are of most concern. 2.5s can penetrate deep into the body and enter the bloodstream, causing all kinds of damage, and are attributable to 4 out of 5 deaths from air pollution. Whilst the World Health Organization has set a maximum limit for PM 2.5s, no threshold has been identified below which no damage to health is observed. An external study of levels of PM 2.5s in Wokingham Borough done by the British Heart Foundation demonstrated that we breach these World Health Organization limits. The British Heart Foundation also produced research that demonstrates how many of the annual deaths due to heart and circulatory disease are attributable to air pollution. The most recent data they produced for Wokingham was for 2017, and that figure is 65. So just let that sink in for a moment. That means 65 people died in Wokingham alone from air pollution in just 1 year. Amongst the many problems associated with air pollution, it stunts lung growth in children, and in Wokingham, according to the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment, we are above national and regional averages for children being hospitalised for respiratory tract infections. Currently, the only air pollution testing done in Wokingham Borough is for nitrogen dioxide. We do not measure anything else, not even the deadly PM 2.5s I mentioned. Even for nitrogen dioxide, we have 3 areas in the borough that exceed so-called safe limits. The action plans that are written in order to tackle air pollution read pretty much the same from year to year. We just do not see enough action. Whilst we are busy dealing with the climate crisis, and I fully support the need for action in this area, we are overlooking the problem of air pollution. It appears to be bundled up with the climate emergency action plan and getting lost. It needs its own focus running in parallel. This is why last year my colleague Councillor Paul Fishwick submitted the low emission transport strategy motion, and why I'm submitting this motion to see real action on tackling something that is killing people. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Fishwick, do you wish to speak now or hold for later?
I wish to speak now, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Please
I
do.
second this motion. In the Wokingham Borough Council area, the key source of air pollution is road transport. As you know, the area has many very busy and congested roads, and one of the busiest motorways in the country passing through the heart of the borough. All pollutants are harmful, but particulate matters and nitrogen dioxide are the most harmful to human health. Under Part 4 of the Environmental Act 1995, the local authority is required to monitor air quality and to send an annual report to DEFRA. The Borough Council acknowledges on its website that particulate matters, along with nitrogen dioxide, are the most harmful to human health. But a read through the annual report, there isn't any monitoring of particulate matters. Why? When it's so harmful. The document also states as a local priority to explore the link between public health and particulate matters 2.5. Why? When this work has been done already by several institutions, including the Royal College of Physicians in 2016. Woking Borough Council does not even know what levels of pollution it has, as it does not measure and monitor one of the most harmful to its residents, the working population, its visitors, and the travelling public. Particulate matters can travel large distances. They can get into the lungs and the blood and be transported around the body, lodging in the heart, the brain, and other organs. This includes your body, your children, your grandchildren, your friends, relatives, and neighbours. Idling cars can have a significant localised effect on air quality, especially around schools, care homes, and railway crossings. Every minute, an idling car produces enough exhaust emissions to fill 150 balloons with harmful chemicals, including nitrogen dioxide, particulate matters, and cyanide. The microscopic pollutants can result in a range of health problems, as mentioned earlier, and have been shown to be particularly damaging to children. The Borough Council's annual report contains an action plan, and reading between 1 year and next, there is little action. This is why this motion is required, and it will support the strategy to lower transport emissions that this council approved in September 2019. I urge you all to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fishwick. Does anyone else wish to speak on this? No one?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I do.
Oh, right. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like...
Councillor Murray is supposed to be... Oh, yes, there you are. Thank you. I just waited for you to appear. Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to propose an amendment to this motion, please, which I will ask Democratic Services to put onto the screen now. I do this not to change the intent of Councillor Kerr's motion at all, but because many of the recommendations that this motion calls on Woking Borough Council to adopt, we are in fact already doing or have already begun undertaking. I have therefore amended the motion to reflect the continuation of our work rather than to suggest that it needs to begin. My amendment is seconded by Councillor Parry Bath and is supported by the Conservative group in total. And if allowed to speak on this motion, I will talk to some of the things that we are already doing in this area of air quality management.
Right. And your seconder for this?
Councillor Parry Bath.
Councillor Parry Bath, thank you. Councillor Perrier, do you wish to speak now or to reserve your right?
Mr. Mayor, I'd actually like to speak on this. I've just been proposing the amendment so far.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, you may be aware that Woking Borough Council has been successful in being awarded over £150,000 of bid funding from DEFRA to further encourage active travel, specifically in the areas of Woking Town and Twyford, where our air quality management areas are located, and in Finch Hampstead, where our air quality agglomeration zone is located. Mr. Mayor, there are some important reasons why winning this bid money is important to our borough. Firstly, DEFRA has a target of reducing NOx levels by 73% by 2030 versus 2005 levels. Having identified that nationally 34% of all NOx comes from road transport emissions and that 25% of that comes from the AM and PM school runs, in order to improve our air quality, one of the key aims as a council is to get more of our students using school transport safely, using active transport methods rather than using cars. With the DEFRA funding, we have been able to appoint an eco-travel officer who will be working with schools to highlight the benefits of active travel. An 8-point strategy covering education, awareness, training events, competitions and other activities has already been devised and will be put into action with our schools over the coming year. In conjunction to this, Mr. Mayor, our Climate Emergency Action Plan includes measures to improve air quality for all across the borough as we seek to reduce our carbon emissions as well. The Air Quality Action Plan elements include a target to reduce NO2 concentrations by 50% versus 2019 levels by 2025, reduce engine idling, educate residents on the causes of poor air quality and their potential mitigating actions, and to introduce active travel management as a means of reducing idling times further. My point, Mr. Mayor, is that even without this motion, air quality management is something that Woking Borough Council takes incredibly seriously and has already taken significant proactive steps to improve. I urge all councillors of all parties to support this amended motion.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Kerr, can I ask if you accept, just a moment? Yes. Beth, do you wish to speak now or later?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, were you talking to me?
Yes, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right to speak later?
I'll reserve the right. Thank you.
To speak later. Okay. So, Councillor Carr, then, can I ask, just a moment, I'm finding the right piece of paper. Councillor Carr, can I ask if you accept the amendment at this page?
Councillor Kerr, can I take a brief adjournment just to discuss with my colleagues, please?
Yes. So we'll, I'll put my picture and sound off for about 5 minutes for you to discuss. And if
could the wording amendment be put up on the screen, please, to aid that conversation with my colleagues?
Yes, indeed. We'll do that on the screen for you. And then I will adjourn for 5 minutes.
Thank you.
decision?
I'd like to ask Councillor Murray if he's prepared to change bullet points 1 and the last bullet point. Firstly, we can't accept the first bullet point. We do not monitor particulate matter in the borough as a council. We don't. It's just not true. So we can't accept that. And the last bullet point, we don't believe just considering a strategy for implementing a car club scheme is enough. We need it to be produced. If you're happy to revert to the original wording on the first and last bullet point, we would accept.
Councillor Murray, can you indicate?
Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to accept that.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay.
You've accepted the amendment 10. So we now will go on to debate the original plus your amendment. And I have a couple of names down here of people who've indicated they want to speak. So
point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, who's speaking?
So it's Councillor Burgess.
Yes.
It's the same point of order as before. If no one wishes to speak against this amended motion, it should go straight to the vote.
Okay. Can do that. So can I ask then if you maybe you all put your hands down, put the hand signs down, and then indicate if you are likely to speak against. So the only ones that should be showing are if you want to speak against this. And can you do that now, please?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, indeed.
It's Stephen Conway. I just wanted to say that while I certainly don't want to speak against the motion, and I understand Councillor Burgess wants to get further on in the agenda, and I'm sure would like to get to her motion, which I think is perfectly understandable. I do think we want to try and avoid a situation where councillors who might want to make substantive points that would actually help the debate are unable to do so. It's a shame if we're just going to go straight to votes, even if we are all in agreement. Sometimes certain things need to be said.
That's what the Constitution says. That's what it says.
Well, I'm not disputing with you what the Constitution says. I'm just saying that's unfortunate if we end up with that situation.
Right. And since no one said they did want to speak. Oh, Jim Fruin, I understand you might want to speak. Would you like to speak now, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whilst I fully support the objectives and the aims of this motion, I find it very difficult to be able to support anything with the no vehicle idling zones. I know most councillors, most members drive new top of the range cars. Some of us are still driving old bangers, and it's not proven that starting and stopping continually in an older car is actually effective in reducing pollution. And also in those posher cars, if I can use that term, they have built-in stop-start technology which manages that eco-friendly efficiency of the engine better than just putting up a few signs and then offering guidance as to no idling. Whilst that's in there, I find reluctantly I cannot support this motion.
Thank you. So it's not unanimous then that they're against it. Councillor Pauline Jorgensen, would you like to speak? Your hand is up. Pauline Jorgensen?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I wanted to comment on the amendment. I'm not sure that it's true that we do not monitor particulates. I've just looked at the 2017 Environmental Quality Report and it talks about particulate monitoring there.
Right. So Stephen Conway said he doesn't want to go against it, but he'd like a discussion. Councillor Fruin's against it. Pauline Jorgensen has indicated. Councillor Gary Cowan, your hand was up for speaking.
No, it wasn't.
Oh, it appeared on here. It's gone then.
Ah.
Have a look.
I haven't gone though.
No. Okay. So what's the decision then?
Sarah,
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Pauline Jorgensen, you've indicated again.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. One other point of order, I'd like some clarity from Democratic Services about it. My understanding is that the mechanism that Labour are using to try and avoid a debate on this says in both cases about the item having been sufficiently discussed. So I would suggest that supports Stephen Conway's comment that he doesn't think the item has been significantly discussed or sufficiently discussed. I wonder if we could get a ruling from Democratic Services on whether this is valid in this case.
I'll get some advice on that.
Under closure motions.
Yeah, but not under the point that I raised. So Pauline, exactly. That's correct.
I would like to get a ruling from the officers, please. Because in essence, this is a closure motion.
Hello, I'm back again. Just going through the book here, I'm advised that 4.2.13, the rules of debate. There is, after a motion has been proposed, seconded, and the proposer has made his or her speech, the Mayor will ask if any member wishes to speak against the motion. If no one wishes to speak against the motion, then the Mayor will put the matter to the vote. So that sounds like it is a question. If no one speaks against, we can go to the vote. The question, I suppose, is whether Councillor Marget, you'd like to speak.
But do you have discretion to allow a debate?
I'm not sure. Normally, if it's written down, we tend to observe the written down rules. So the views being made by some people are that they would like a debate, but no one has actually.
Mr. Mayor, may I just briefly say, I raised this issue, but I have no wish to delay us getting on to further business on the agenda. And if we are all in agreement, more or less, I know Jim is not, then I'd like to delay this further.
I second that. Let's go to the vote.
Can we just vote on this now?
Right. So it seems we'd have a couple of different views here. Can Sarah have a right of reply at this point, please?
Mr. Mayor, can I interrupt? I have reserved the right to vote and I've reserved the right to speak, but I haven't been given the opportunity. I'm the seconder to the amendment.
Just a moment.
We accepted the amendment and now it falls to us. So it's now my motion.
I totally accept the amendment and I support the amendment.
I've got two people speaking at the same time. Councillor Carr, would you like to just say again what you were saying?
Yeah, I was just saying, as we accepted the amendment, it's my motion, so it's now my right to reply.
So it's my right to actually speak as a seconder.
No, because you didn't use the right on the seconder.
That's not correct.
I believe.
There is no amendment because it's been accepted.
Can I quickly speak and can we get on to the vote?
I think that seems a good idea to me. Yes.
All I wanted to say very quickly to Pauline Jorgensen, page 23 of the annual report that goes to DEFRA states no PM 2.5 is monitored. So I just want to clarify that point. But great that we will be doing it. So thank you very much.
But you have agreed that the motion and the amendment are acceptable, and so we can go straight to the vote. Thank you. Right. So 16, 17. Here we go. Can we go to the vote where all your hands are down? Okay. And now, if you wish to vote for, can you please use the hands up feature now? If you wish to vote for.
Councillor Howe voting for.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. Okay, I think counting the hands. So can you take the hands down now, please? That was the for vote. Take them down. Now the second one, if you wish to vote against, which seems unlikely to me, no, but if you wish to vote against,
Malcolm, your hands up.
Can you put your hands up if you wish to vote against? Now. I can't see hands up. Right, so whichever way you started, make sure all your hands are down. Okay, and now the third one is abstain. If you wish to abstain from this, can you please use the hand feature now? Right, the motion is carried. Thank you. So we now move on. Actually, it's 10 minutes to 11. I need to check something. Please bear with me. We've checked because we are down to the last 10 minutes of the extended meeting to 11. That does not give us enough time.
No one actually, it's Councillor G here. No, we're not. When you went off, it was 22:48. It's still not.
It's 15 minutes is for the last part of the meeting.
You said
if there isn't a minimum of 15 minutes, we can't start a fresh one.
Right, you said 10 minutes.
I said, well, it is, according to my watch, it's just coming up to 10 minutes to 11, but it's certainly less than 15 minutes is what perhaps I could have said. So on that basis, we can't start a fresh motion. And so at that stage, if I turn over the pages where we are on the agenda, we seem to have reached the end of the council meeting.
Mr. Mayor, can we not test the water with this other motion?
I don't think we can do much at this stage now. Just declared the meeting is closed because we don't have enough time to start a fresh motion, and we're within the last 10 minutes before shut.
Why not test it? We'd be happy to go ahead with it, Andy. We would be happy to go ahead.
Put it up and get it voted, get it done. No, propose a second, bang, do it.
Here with me, might even get have a look at some more notes.
Mr. Mayor, it's possible that we will get to a situation where, again, we don't need to have a lengthy debate because there will be agreement in all parts.
I think the issue you will have is you'll get the proposer and seconder speaking, and then there will be no time for anybody else wanting to speak, which is presumably exactly what Andy wants.
And I've just read, everybody, I've just looked at the book here, 4.2.8.1, consideration of motions. A motion cannot be moved if there is only 15 minutes or less remaining before the meeting is due to conclude, be that at 10:15 or 10:45. If at the time the meeting is due to close, it's different if a motion's already in discussion, but we cannot start a fresh one. So we are now at the end of the council meeting, and I declare the council meeting closed at 10 minutes to 11. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Malcolm.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr.